This young man had been an insect expert in his past life. After reincarnating, he somehow became the strongest poison master in the martial world. The giant blue-spotted centipede that once terrified the whole jianghu was nothing more than his pet. Even the Queen of Yellow Winds, who commanded countless bees under heaven, had been raised by his own hands. Those cute little larvae looked soft and harmless, yet they were obedient and knew how to protect their master. They seemed harmless, but each one carried a rare heavenly poison. Anyone who picked a fight with him, even a demonic cult fiend, would be sent straight to the grave. At the start of the story, Xiao Long was a small but famous content creator who made videos about insects and venomous animals. One unlucky day, a snake bit his hand, and he reincarnated into a martial arts world. But no matter where he ended up, Xiao Long could never give up his hobby of collecting poisonous creatures. That day, a group of travelers came to ask Xiao Long for shelter for the night, since the sky had already grown dark. From their clothing, he immediately recognized them as people from the Sichuan Tang Sect. Xiao Long agreed and told them they could rest wherever they liked, but the main hall was in use and they must not go near it. Tang Shan, the Tang clan head, cupped his hands in thanks, and Xiao Long excused himself because he had something important to do. That important matter turned out to be feeding time for his little darlings. Xiao Long entered the room and opened the lid of a jar. Inside were several insects that looked like crickets. Holding the jar, he fussed over them and said he had almost been late. Everyone was hungry, right? Then he opened another jar. Inside was a black earth spider, a species said to live around Hainan in China and able to grow up to 20 centimeters as an adult. Xiao Long picked up a cricket with chopsticks and offered it to Little Black. Smelling food, Little Black devoured it like it had been starving for days. The old man could not even handle feeding them on time. After that, Xiao Long went to the cabinet beside him. Inside a drawer was a chameleon, another local species marked by stripes across its body and tail. In his past life, chameleons were hard to buy because there was no supply. Now he could find them everywhere just by stepping outside. Yet the old man kept standing there nagging instead of feeding it. "You have been my old man for far too long." The irritated chameleon snapped straight at Xiao Long's finger, making him cry out in pain. Just then, Tang Shan suddenly came looking for Xiao Long. He thanked Xiao Long for letting them shelter from the rain and asked whether he wanted to have dinner with them, since they had just hunted a deer in the forest. At the mention of meat, Xiao Long's eyes sparkled and tears welled up. Since reincarnating here, he had never eaten a proper meal and had survived entirely on snakes, centipedes, and lizards. So Xiao Long happily agreed at once. Finally, he could eat meat. The scene shifted to everyone sitting around a fire, grilling the venison. The rich smell of roasted meat spread through the air, and Xiao Long could barely stop himself from drooling. While waiting for the meat to cook, Tang Shan asked if he lived alone on the mountain and how old he was. Xiao Long answered that he was probably around 14 or 15. Not wanting to reveal too much, he said he had suffered an injury as a child and could not clearly remember his past. He had grown up alone on the mountain, catching snakes, skinning them, and selling them to make a living. As they talked, the roasted meat finally finished cooking. Tang Jun, Tang Shan's father, handed him a steaming deer leg. Xiao Long thanked the senior and happily accepted it. He immediately took a huge bite. The meat practically melted in his mouth. It was tender, fragrant, well-seasoned, juicy from the perfect heat, and not dry at all. It had been ages since Xiao Long last ate roasted meat this good, and he was overjoyed. As they ate, Tang Shan told him they were searching for a giant centipede with blue spots on its body. People called it the Blue-Spotted Centipede, and it was enormous. A fully grown one could treat a human as nothing more than a meal. Tang Shan wanted to capture it because his daughter was bedridden with a serious illness. Only the centipede's inner core could save her. Xiao Long sighed inwardly that parents in this world would do anything for their children. Although he felt sorry for the centipede, he had been treated to meat, so he decided to help them. Xiao Long spoke up, saying that while he did not know what the blue-spotted centipede was, he could guess where it might be. Xiao Long trusted his knowledge of venom more than anyone. Of the 8.7 million living species, around 20,000 were known to be poisonous. He had stored all that knowledge in his head, species by species, and when it came to venom, everything lay in the palm of his hand. Wei Xiaolong held the book and focused completely. The pages flipped by themselves, glowing with a mysterious light. After a moment, he closed the book and happily said he had found it. Xiaolong winked and said excitedly that if it was a giant centipede, he thought he knew where it was. Tang Shan pressed him in shock, and Tang Jun quickly asked where it might be. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Long asked where they had already searched and at what times. Although Tang Shan did not know why he was asking, he answered that they had searched north and east of the area, mostly during the day. To the north, they mainly searched along the river bank. Xiao Long rubbed his chin and murmured that this explained why they had failed to find it. Tang Shan and Tang Jun were stunned when Xiao Long said that of course they would not find it that way. Tang Jun blurted out in surprise and hurriedly asked him to explain why. Xiao Long smiled proudly and explained that centipedes are arthropods in the myriapod group. They roam widely and are cold-blooded, so they need hiding places with stable temperature and moisture. Unlike most insects, whose outer layer blocks water well, centipedes have weaker protection and breathing holes on their shells, so they do not actually like places with too much water. They need high humidity, but they dislike areas with abundant water. On the other hand, without moisture, they cannot survive for long. That is one of a centipede's unique traits. Sitting by the porch, Xiao Long continued. A huge blue-spotted centipede probably would not hide in dense forest, or by the river. Tang Jun felt his head hurt, unable to believe that centipedes did not simply prefer rotten wood cracks. Xiao Long said that small centipedes might be found in places like that, but the one they described was huge. If its body was that large, fallen trees in the forest or rocks by the river would not suit it because there would be nowhere for it to hide. After hearing this, Tang Shan and Tang Jun exchanged a glance and nodded. Sitting beside him, Tang Shan said anxiously that if they found it where Xiao Long pointed, they would surely repay him. Xiao Long smiled, proudly pointed toward the mountain ahead, and said they should try searching the rocky western mountain instead. Centipedes usually rest under sun-warmed rocks during the day and only come out at night. When night fell, moonlight shone across the steep cliffs. On the cliffside, everyone split up to search. At the mountain peak, Tang Shan stood firmly and watched, frowning in deep thought. At that moment, someone ran over and asked whether the young hero might have been wrong. Tang Shan fell silent and wondered if that could be true. Tang Shan jumped down and ordered everyone to rest there for the day and fire the signal arrow to gather the search teams. The soldiers obeyed, and the signal arrow burst brightly in the sky. As everyone rested, they groaned about how exhausted they were and hoped the young hero's words were right. They complained among themselves, wondering why that damned centipede still had not appeared. They said the young hero seemed intelligent, but then they heard movement from Tang Shan. He clenched his teeth and trembled, murmuring that Tang Nanni was considered the greatest genius in Tang Sect history, and asking whether heaven had truly abandoned him. Just then, someone shouted that the Grand Patriarch had returned, and everyone greeted him at once. Tang Jun approached Tang Shan and asked whether they had found nothing again today. Tang Shan answered yes, then asked whether his father had found anything either. Tang Jun gave a light cough and said the situation was not promising. Tang Nanni could hold on for at most 3 more months. They did not know whether they could find the centipede within the next 10 days. The two fell silent, weighed down by the same grief. Tang Shan suggested searching the south tomorrow. Since they had still found no trace, Tang Jun sighed and agreed. Suddenly, Tang Jun asked loudly whether they had found nothing at all. Then he slapped his forehead and laughed, finally realizing the answer. This was the place. Seeing a ray of hope, Tang Shan asked whether his father had discovered something. But Tang Jun gave an unexpected answer. No. Just as Tang Shan said, he had found no traces and felt nothing at all. Tang Shan asked in surprise if that was true. Tang Jun confirmed it. Precisely because there was nothing, he felt the centipede was here. He looked around and asked whether they had found anything on this rocky mountain over the past 3 days. Tang Shan replied that they had found no trace at all. Tang Jun rubbed his chin thoughtfully, and said there were no beast droppings, no territorial marks, and truly nothing at all. As soon as he said that, he startled, and Tang Shan seemed to realize it too. Tang Jun excitedly said that it was impossible for such a vast rocky mountain to have no animal traces. Tang Shan clenched his fist and murmured that this was its territory. Tang Jun answered happily that because of that, all the animals nearby had either fled or become food for the centipede. He patted Tang Shan's shoulder and comforted him, saying the blue-spotted centipede was definitely here and that Nan-ni could be saved. Tang Shan seemed to see the light, biting his lip, but before he could finish speaking, the ground shook violently. Everyone screamed in panic, asking what was happening and what that thing was. Someone was so terrified that he stepped into the campfire without realizing it. Right where the flames were burning, a huge explosion rang out. Tang Jun and Tang Shan froze in shock and shouted, asking what it was. A sharp pincer suddenly appeared and smashed into the ground. The soldiers stammered in terror as rocks and soil rained down on them. Tang Jun's face went pale as he shouted. The shape of the giant centipede, the blue-spotted centipede, slowly emerged. At the same time, chaos rang out in the city, and Xiao Long lazily said everything had gone crazy. He sprawled out and wondered how huge that centipede was to make everyone panic. They were supposed to search for it, not overturn the whole mountain. Xiao Long grinned, wondering if it was big enough to swallow him whole, and grew genuinely curious. In the night mountains, everyone gathered around the corpse of the centipede they had finally killed. Tang Jun opened a box and said this was the inner core of the blue-spotted centipede. Everyone around him was moved, while he covered his emotion with a cough and said Nani could now be saved. Tang Shan, badly injured, stepped forward and asked his father to send the uninjured martial artists ahead to Sichuan first. Tang Jun asked what he meant. Tang Shan looked into the distance, and said favors must be repaid and grudges avenged. A grudge is carved in blood, and a favor is carved in stone. Was there not still something they needed to do here? Tang Jun slapped his own head, realizing he had almost made a huge mistake because he was too focused on Nani. He put away the core and said they should treat that young hero as an honored guest and fulfill anything he wanted. Tang Shan agreed and said the injured martial artist should remain in the village to recover. During that time, he would go meet the young hero, who was probably eager to hear their news. Xiao Long looked gloomy, surrounded by strange little creatures crawling around him. Even as they clung to him, he wondered what he should do now. Overnight he had become the father of blue-spotted centipedes. Xiao Long muttered that when he came home, he wiped the eggs clean and placed them by his pillow. When he woke up in the morning, the babies had all hatched and were crawling all over him. Looking at their round bodies and rabbit-like ears, Xiao Long held back his feelings and said he had expected it, but not that they would hatch so quickly. He glanced at one baby sleeping against his cheek. Suddenly it peed, making him panic and tell them to move away. The real problem, he thought, was whether these little ones had mistaken him for their mother. One baby kept biting his clothes, and he muttered that they clung to him and refused to leave even half a step. The previous night, in a certain mountain crevice, he had found the secret nest of the blue-spotted centipede. The closer he got to the cave, the more frightening it felt. He accidentally kicked something and shouted, wondering what kind of beetle was as big as a human fist. The torch in Xiao Long's hand fell, and the beetle beside him collapsed on the ground, gasping. Xiao Long wiped his sweat and said that was close. Then he looked into his bag and saw that at least 3 eggs were still safe. He scratched his head and muttered that luckily the rain had stopped, or he would not have saved any of the eggs. Suddenly realizing something, he shot to his feet and said this was no time to delay. He had to hurry home and wipe the eggs clean. He tied the egg pouch securely to his waist. With an excited face, Xiao Long shouted for his little centipedes to wait for him. Then the eggs hatched, and he sat there sighing that although he had never seen a living blue-spotted centipede, saving these eggs was already lucky. The adorable babies kept clinging to Xiao Long, leaving him a little troubled. He asked whether they had no plans to leave him. They mischievously crawled down his back as he muttered that he knew they did not need to eat before their second molt, so food was not a problem, but having them cling to him like this was awkward. Xiao Long suddenly realized that if he went into the water, they might leave him on their own. A wicked look crossed his face, frightening the little blue-spotted centipedes. He decided it was time to take a bath. Early the next morning, Tang Shan, his wounds wrapped in bandages, walked steadily toward a room. When he reached the room, he called out loudly, asking if the young hero was inside. After standing at the door for a while, he called again. Hearing no sound inside, he pushed open the door and said he was coming in. Looking around, Tang Shan found no one and murmured about the herbs, jars, and medicine boxes. Looking at the herbs, he wondered whether this young hero was skilled in medicine. Then he sighed and scolded himself for entering an empty room without permission, thinking it was very rude. Tang Shan decided to leave and said he would come back later. Suddenly, he heard strange sounds and turned back curiously, wondering what the noise was. Behind him stood several large jars. He stepped over quietly, lifted a lid, and could not help exclaiming when he saw a spider holding something white in its mouth. He murmured that it was a spider lord. Looking toward the medicine cabinet, he whispered in disbelief. Tang Shan immediately opened a drawer and found an orange-striped creature inside. He wondered if this was a stone lizard. He could hardly believe his eyes. In one jar were brown beetles, beside it was a basin filled with strange eggs, and nearby was a box packed with dried snakes. So shocked that he could barely move, he muttered about a type of lizard and felt as if he had entered a room filled with poisonous creatures. Tang Shan wondered if the young hero was raising and breeding all of them. Even the Tang family, famous for poisons and venomous creatures, only managed them and extracted toxins. They would never have imagined breeding them like this. He closed the door and walked outside, murmuring that through one small stroke of fate, he had saved his beloved daughter's life. Clenching his fist, Tang Shan wondered whether the true stroke of fate was this young hero. Suddenly he heard someone call him from behind. He turned back as Xiao Long hurried over and asked what had happened to his arm, and whether he had any other injuries. Tang Shan placed a hand on his shoulder and said it was nothing serious. What he really needed to say was something else. Suddenly he sensed something strange and murmured, asking what it was. An evil aura appeared behind Xiao Long. The door suddenly shattered, and a strange figure appeared, filled with killing intent and wearing a terrifying smile that revealed sharp teeth. Tang Shan hurriedly pushed Xiao Long aside and shouted for the young hero to leave. Xiao Long did not understand what was happening and called out to the senior. Meanwhile, the masked attacker had already taken an attacking stance. Yunxiang flew forward, destroying everything around him as he charged straight at Tang Shan. He poured power into his arm and struck hard, making Tang Shan cough blood and suffer serious injuries. Tang Shan realized the enemy's strength in alarm, muttering that he was on the same level as his father. Then he shouted for the young hero to run. Before he finished speaking, Xiao Long was grabbed by the neck and lifted into the air. Gasping, he called out to the senior. Yunxiang laughed proudly, saying he had heard the Tang family had entered Hainan and came to look, only to find the snake of the myriad poison divine lord injured and alone. Tang Shan struggled to stand and asked who this senior was and why he was tormenting both him and the young hero. Yunxiang laughed, saying he would understand by looking at his face and his red fist. Your father made me like this. I am the Bloodhand Rakshasa, Jia Yunxiang. Tang Shan remembered his old appearance and murmured that Jia Yunxiang was said to have been poisoned in the head and fallen from a seaside cliff, yet he had survived. Seeing Xiao Long's struggle in his hand, Tang Shan shouted that the young hero had nothing to do with them and begged him to let him go. He offered his own life in exchange for the boy. Yunxiang tightened his grip and refused, saying even touching him would mean death. This highly skilled demon would bring harm to the world. Tang Shan angrily clenched his teeth, realizing that the fiend had no intention of releasing the young hero. Xiao Long was being choked beyond endurance. Yunxiang laughed and told him to die. Xiao Long forced out a desperate plea for someone to save him. The little blue-spotted centipedes on Xiao Long's body burst out and latched onto the demon's arm. They bit Yunxiang again and again, making him panic and shout, asking whether they were centipedes. Yunxiang tried to shake them off, yelling that centipedes could truly threaten him. The bugs injected poison into his body, making him cough blood. In the end, Yunxiang collapsed, cursing, and then lay motionless at Xiao Long's feet. Xiao Long murmured in fear that the man was dead. He nudged him with his foot and asked if he was still alive. Tang Shan stood there with his mouth open, stunned. Then he smiled as if he had found treasure, and wondered whether this young hero was not just an honored guest. Xiao Long poked Yunxiang with a stick. In the end, he became a member of the Tang family at the Taoist temple. A few days after Jia Yunxiang fell, a relieved sigh sounded in the room. Wei Xiao Long was caring for the weakened Tang Shan in bed, and Tang Shan thanked him. Xiao Long said they could not delay any longer, and if Tang Shan told him where his people were, he would go check. Then he scratched his chin, realizing it would be bad to leave Tang Shan alone, but they could not call a doctor either. Tang Shan hurriedly said he was fine and would recover after a few days of rest. Xiao Long sighed inwardly at how much blood the old man had lost while still acting calm. He remembered Tang Shan coughing while insisting he was fine. Xiao Long immediately argued that his condition was very serious. Tang Shan weakly breathed and replied that he only said it to keep Xiao Long from worrying. Then he added that he was a man of the martial world. Xiao Long was surprised and asked if that meant he was a martial artist. He excitedly asked whether they were people who could leap through the air and use palm techniques. Tang Shan smiled and said not everyone could do that, but it was more or less true. Xiao Long thought this world really was different, otherwise, a centipede as big as a house would make no sense. Tang Shan interrupted his thoughts and said that since he had saved Xiao Long, although it might be rude, he should formally introduce himself. He said he was Tang Xueshan of the Sichuan Tang Sect. Xiao Long replied that he was Wei Xiao Long. Tang Shan closed his eyes and praised the name Xiao Long, meaning little dragon. Then he looked at him and said he had many questions, asking whether Xiao Long would answer. Xiao Long politely agreed. Tang Shan asked whether the black poisonous creatures were centipedes. Xiao Long looked down at the larvae clinging to him, lightly poked them, and confirmed that they were blue-spotted centipede larvae. Tang Shan was so shocked that he sat up and exclaimed that Xiao Long had tamed blue-spotted centipede larvae. Xiao Long panicked and told him to lie back down, but Tang Shan ignored him and asked where he had managed to tame them. Xiao Long stammered that while waiting for him, he had seen them. Tang Shan cut him off and asked whether the other poisonous creatures were also raised by Xiao Long. Xiao Long awkwardly said the story might be a little long and asked if Tang Shan wanted to hear it. Tang Shan covered his mouth and coughed, saying it was fine. Xiao Long began by explaining the blue-spotted centipede eggs. Outside, night wrapped the quiet temple as if it were listening to Xiao Long's story. After hearing everything, Tang Shan asked in shock whether Xiao Long had taken the eggs himself and raised them. Xiao Long said yes and that he had guessed they would hatch. Tang Shan sweated, wondering who could know exactly when eggs would hatch and how. Xiao Long asked the senior to wait a moment. With that, Xiao Long opened the cabinet, carried out several creatures, and asked whether Tang Shan wanted to see them. He held up one creature and proudly introduced it as a common cave lizard with yellow stripes on its body and white stripes on its tail. Then he introduced another, explaining that lizards with large white tail stripes had been selected for pairing, resulting in those two traits. Tang Shan looked at the creatures before him and exclaimed in disbelief. He asked whether Xiao Long had created those colors. Xiao Long happily confirmed it and asked if they were beautiful. Tang Shan swallowed and wondered whether pairing creatures with stronger venom could create an even more venomous species. Xiao Long was surprised by the question. In theory, his mind spun through the idea, it might be possible. After thinking, he said that if they knew which venom was stronger, then yes, it could be done, though it would be difficult. Tang Shan suddenly shouted, shocking him. Tang Shan placed his hands on Xiao Long's shoulders and seriously urged him to join the clan. If he joined the Tang Sect, all their secret martial arts would be taught without reservation. Rare herbs, spirit plants, and any poison he wanted would be within reach. Tang Shan passionately said that Xiao Long might even be able to catch or raise one of the 10 great venomous insects of the Central Plains. If that still was not enough, Tang Shan used his trump card. He said he was not boasting, but one of the 3 treasures of the Central Plains was his daughter. Xiao Long hurriedly stopped him and asked what he had just said. Tang Shan suddenly realized what he had implied and laughed, saying Xiao Long was young but still a man. His daughter was one of the 3 treasures of the Central Plains. Xiao Long shouted that this was not the kind of condition he meant. Thinking of the 10 great venomous insects Tang Shan mentioned, Xiao Long clenched his fists and asked if they were as terrifying as the blue-spotted centipede. Tang Shan stressed that of course they were. He smirked proudly and said the blue-spotted centipede was powerful, but it was still a low-grade poisonous creature and could not compare to the 10 great venomous insects of the Central Plains. He described centipedes as big as houses and golden centipedes that glittered like pure gold. Xiao Long kept imagining them in shock, but Tang Shan added that reality would surpass anything he imagined. Tang Shan sighed that it truly was strange. Looking at Xiao Long's glowing, excited face and the 2 larvae hiding in his clothes, Tang Shan concluded that he had successfully persuaded him. 2 days later at the temple, Tang Shan's disciples shouted when they heard the news. Bloodhand Rakshasa Jia Yunxiang had appeared. Tang Shan said he had almost fallen into great trouble, never expecting Yunxiang to have hidden away and trained until he was nearly at his father's level. The disciples stammered in fear. One disciple could barely speak, then suddenly wondered if the clan head had killed him and reached the myriad poison realm. Another disciple immediately congratulated him, and the others followed. Tang Shan sighed and denied it. He continued, saying the one who killed Yunxiang was not him, but this young hero. A disciple gasped in shock, asking if it was really this young hero. The disciple turned and grabbed Xiao Long's hand, shouting for confirmation. The disciples immediately thanked the young hero for saving their clan head. As the head of the Sichuan Tang family, they wondered if he was some enlightened master who had kept a youthful appearance. Xiao Long was completely caught off guard and asked what they meant by eternal youth. Tang Shan calmly cut in, saying there seemed to be a misunderstanding and asking Xiao Long to show them. After a moment, Xiao Long agreed and called his babies out. The disciples stared wide-eyed at the wriggling creatures trying to peek out from Xiao Long's clothes. The tiny larvae chirped and looked around. Seeing them clearly, the disciple exclaimed that they were centipedes and that these were the ones that defeated Jia Yunxiang. Another disciple shouted in fear, asking whether their poison was safe. A different disciple could not hide his admiration and asked if Xiao Long had truly tamed blue-spotted centipedes at such a young age. Tang Shan calmly continued that he had decided to bring this young hero into their clan. One disciple shouted excitedly that it was a wonderful opportunity. Tang Shan's voice then drew everyone's attention away from their excitement. He clenched his fist and said seriously that they should not delay any longer. Xiao Long asked whether the senior still wanted to search for something else, but Tang Shan only fell silent. Then Tang Shan said gravely that Bloodhand Rakshasa Jia Yunxiang practiced the Bloodhand Poison Claw, a dreadful evil art that required human blood and marrow to raise its level. Xiao Long shuddered, wondering what kind of insane demonic art that was. Tang Shan firmly decided that if Yunxiang had left behind a manual or disciple, they had to remove the danger and keep such cruel evil arts from reappearing in the jianghu. Clenching his fist, Tang Shan said that if anyone had been captured, they had to help them. The disciples agreed at once. He then asked the young hero to lend a hand, since Xiao Long knew Hainan Island's terrain. Xiao Long fell silent in thought. The larvae crept closer and chirped. He closed his eyes and considered that becoming part of the Tang family might mean accepting a lifelong mission. Normally, an internship was supposed to let you observe a company's atmosphere and judge the leader's character, right? He cheerfully replied that he understood and would fully assist once Tang Shan recovered. The disciple found his answer interesting, and Tang Shan praised the young hero for thinking clearly. Xiao Long smiled brightly and said of course he had to help when people needed saving. Outwardly he looked humble, but inwardly he thought he would use this trip to learn everything he could about the Sichuan Tang clan. He smugly thought that talented people interviewed the company too. 3 days after Elder Taizan recovered, Tang Shan, Wei Xiaolong, and the disciples set out to search for Bloodhand Rakshasa Jia Yunxiang's hiding place, stopping at a village near the abandoned temple. They asked the villagers whether anyone had gone missing. The worried villagers said 1 or 2 people had disappeared in the forest over the past year, but the incidents had not happened regularly. Tang Shan stroked his beard in thought. The group cupped their hands in thanks, and Tang Shan thanked the village chief on their behalf. The old man warmly replied that helping the Tang family was his honor, and they exchanged farewells. Unfortunately, they gathered no further information and continued on their way. Xiao Long wondered whether this village was no different from the others. Tang Shan pondered and said that since Yunxiang had discovered them and appeared, he had assumed the man would be nearby, but searching was truly difficult. Xiao Long also thought it was strange. How could there be no trace at all? Remembering Yunxiang's attack, he wondered what the man had said. Thinking of that, Xiao Long suddenly asked if Tang Shan remembered what Yunxiang said when he appeared. Tang Shan said he did not remember clearly, and asked Xiao Long. Xiao Long recalled that he had been hit and sent flying, then analyzed that Yunxiang had said the Tang family had entered Hainan Island. Tang Shan asked if that was so. Xiao Long continued that this meant someone knew the Tang family had entered Hainan and told Jia Yunxiang. Tang Shan nodded, saying that was likely. Xiao Long excitedly suggested a simple solution. They only had to check the routes they had traveled on Hainan Island. If they asked around using a description of the man's appearance, they would find him. Tang Shan and the disciples looked at him in surprise, and Tang Shan praised the idea, saying Yunxiang must have heard from someone who had seen them. While Xiao Long felt embarrassed by the praise, Tang Shan decided they should move immediately. They continued to another village, where a heavy, gloomy atmosphere hung over everything. As they entered, Xiao Long said he had heard there might be such a village near the port of Hainan Island. Tang Shan observed that it seemed to be a village where women lived, then ordered the group to go in and look. According to the young hero, the women here might not be too hostile toward them. The disciples answered, and inside the village the people looked deeply depressed. Many stared blankly, and some even lay in front of their homes. One villager worked quietly. When they called out, the villagers' attention turned toward them. Seeing the group enter, one villager asked what they wanted in the women's village. Tang Shan was somewhat surprised to see the village chief holding a little girl's hand, accompanied by 2 young men from the village. He raised his head and introduced himself as Tang Taizan, head of the Tang family of Sichuan, saying they had come for a reason. While the others spoke, Xiao Long quietly observed the surroundings. He judged that the village truly lacked vitality, and even the children had no strength. Noticing something strange, he wondered what condition these people were in. Looking around, he saw everyone listless and wondered whether they had all been drugged. The village chief said he knew nothing about disappearances because nothing had happened. His expression changed, and he told them to leave. Tang Shan tried to persuade him, but the number of people in the houses seemed strangely small. The old man shouted that this was not something outsiders needed to concern themselves with, and told them to go. Both Tang Shan and Xiao Long were surprised by his attitude. Tang Shan quietly told the young hero that the villagers here were clearly said to be friendly. Xiao Long did not understand either, and just then the child the chief was holding suddenly collapsed. The old man cried out in panic, calling Ma Chan's name and asking if she had fallen. He broke down, saying she was his only remaining family and asking why even she had contracted that strange illness. Tang Shan knelt on one knee before the old man and said he knew a little medicine, asking if he could help. The old man asked if he meant Central Plains medicine. Tang Shan said he was not a doctor, but understood some medical arts and asked to examine the child. The old man quickly agreed and begged for help. The old village chief explained that a strange illness had appeared in the village some time ago. The children had died one after another, while the adults grew weaker after falling ill. Tang Shan comforted him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said he would take a look. With tears in his eyes, the old man thanked him again and again. He urged them inside, then shouted at the villagers to hurry and bring the doctor and his group in. The group rushed inside. While running, Xiao Long asked the disciple whether the senior also knew medicine. The disciple said yes and explained that the Tang family's martial arts involved handling poisons, so they were quite skilled in pharmacology. Moreover, martial arts begins with understanding the body, so some medical knowledge is necessary. Xiao Long suddenly thought he had assumed they were just assassins who used poison, but joining the Sichuan Tang family meant learning frightening poison arts and medicine too, which sounded fascinating. The disciple then said rather cruelly that sometimes they caught evildoers and injected them with poison to observe the reaction, which was also interesting. Hearing that, Xiao Long panicked and wondered if they experimented on human bodies. Thinking of Tang Shan and those dangerous disciples, Xiao Long shivered and thought that might be a bit too much. They really were frightening people. The sky remained gloomy as the first rays of dawn shone onto a house. Ma Chan lay motionless, an unpleasant green aura spreading from her body, her eyes closed. Tang Shan briefly explained to the old chief that he had first transferred inner energy into her to stabilize her breathing. The old man thanked him, stroked Ma Chan's head, and sadly said she was his only granddaughter, begging Tang Shan to help. Tang Shan said her pulse seemed unstable and asked whether the child's heart had been weak from birth. The old man replied that the illness had only worsened half a year earlier, and it was not just his granddaughter. Many others were suffering. The old man explained that they called it the strange illness. He had told everyone to leave at the main gate for that reason. Xiao Long immediately understood. Tang Shan asked the elder to first gather everyone in the village so he could prescribe heart medicine and test it. The old man sobbed in gratitude and thanked him repeatedly. Xiao Long quietly watched Tang Shan with a gentle smile. When night fell, one of the disciples softly called for the clan head. The disciple said Tang Shan had worked hard examining everyone. Tang Shan thanked him and asked Jiao Bai about the patient's condition. After thinking for a moment, he said it was truly strange. He analyzed symptoms of weakness, swollen eyes, unstable pulse, and mild fever. The symptoms differed, but the seriously ill patients all had heart problems. Then he remembered the young hero and asked where he was. Jiao Bai reported that the young hero seemed exhausted after helping everyone and had fallen asleep, so he had been taken to a room to rest. Tang Shan pictured the disciples carrying Xiao Long inside. The disciple sighed that the young hero had done his best. Tang Shan said that following them without having trained martial arts must have been tiring for such a body, then decided to check on his complexion. Jiao Bai offered to guide him. The room door opened softly. Inside, Xiao Long was sound asleep and knew nothing. Tang Shan did not enter at first. He only stood outside and silently watched. Suddenly, he pushed the door open, rushed to the bed, and brought his hand down like lightning, slapping Xiao Long hard enough to make him cry out in pain. Xiao Long woke up and stared at him in angry confusion, calling out to the senior while wondering why he had suddenly stopped. Then Tang Shan's unexpected strike left him completely baffled. Holding his cheek, Xiao Long asked what that was about. He shrank back against the wall and asked what was going on, saying it hurt. Tang Shan immediately softened his voice and apologized, explaining that he had only meant to catch a bug crawling on Xiao Long's cheek. Xiao Long frowned and asked about a bug. Tang Shan awkwardly told him to listen and glanced through the doorway, saying he had only come to visit before resting. Suddenly, Tang Shan spotted a bug and said there it was. A bug flew over and landed on Xiao Long's face. Tang Shan pointed at it with sharp eyes and explained that Hainan Island had many poisonous insects he did not fully know, so he had unconsciously swatted it. Tang Shan held up the bug and told Xiao Long to look at how big it was. Xiao Long stared blankly for a moment, then suddenly realized something and wondered why this bug was here. Xiao Long asked the senior whether the patients had different symptoms, yet all seemed to share one abnormal point. Tang Shan confirmed it, and Xiao Long said he had found the cause of the strange illness spreading through the village. Xiao Long pointed at the bug in Tang Shan's hand and said it was the cause. Tang Shan exclaimed in shock. Xiao Long explained that this insect belonged to the kissing bug family, named that way because it often sucks blood from the eyes or lips of sleeping people. It moves quickly, even faster than mosquitoes, so it is also known as a vampire bug or assassin bug. Xiao Long wiped away the bug's blood with a cloth and said the insect itself was not venomous, but its belly was full of harmful parasites. When it bit people, they became infected through its waste. Trypanosoma infection, or Chagas disease, was the illness it caused, and it ranked among the deadliest causes related to animals. Xiao Long asked the village chief whether the village dogs had been panting or showing symptoms similar to the humans. The chief panicked and said yes, asking if this bug was the cause. Xiao Long sighed and said it was possible, though not certain yet. The old man asked whether his granddaughter could be saved. Xiao Long said that with medicine there was a chance. Tang Shan suddenly laughed softly and confidently asked Jiu Bai how good his judgment of people was. Jiu Bai happily replied that he had indeed recognized the young hero's value. Xiao Long entered, wondering why they were acting like that. Tang Shan told him to join the Sichuan Tang family. Xiao Long froze, and Tang Shan repeated that he wanted to take him into their clan. Xiao Long could not understand why. Tang Shan explained that there was something called goo insects, also known as sorcery goo or poisonous goo, raised by wicked people in the Central Plains. He continued that evil people made others swallow these insects, then periodically caused them agony, or used them to control people. Xiao Long was stunned and said controlling people like that was terrifying. Tang Shan said the power was real, and many in the jianghu had died because of this strange thing. Some killed their own children and then themselves, while others betrayed their families and became slaves to evildoers. Hearing this, the village chief wept beside them, saying poor Ma Chan. Tang Shan said that for a long time, martial artists had worked to create an antidote for this strange goo, a medicine that could drive it out of the body or dissolve it completely. Xiao Long said it was hard to imagine. Suddenly Tang Shan took something from his robe and loudly asked where the martial world would make such an antidote if it existed. Proudly, he held up a round pill and said it would of course come from the Sichuan Tang family. If this medicine could dissolve a fist-sized tumor in the body, what were tiny microorganisms in comparison? He presented the shining pill, the goo-dissolving pill, and said only a little was enough. Xiao Long's eyes widened in admiration as he repeated the name. He muttered that even a parasite-killing medicine had an impressive title. Seeing the chief teary-eyed, he told him not to worry. Tang Shan said his granddaughter could be saved. Starting with the chief's granddaughter, the villagers gradually recovered. The chief hugged Ma Chan in joy and called it a blessing. The villagers' warm welcome was the reward for their efforts. Seeing their cheerful faces, it seemed the stories about the women's clan being optimistic were true. Tang Shan patted Xiao Long's shoulder and said that if Xiao Long had not found the cause, then the true benefactor was not him, but the young hero. The young villagers thanked the young hero again and again. Xiao Long grew embarrassed as people shouted that he was their village's savior. Although the Tang family's medicine cured them, Tang Shan gave all the credit to him and let everyone show him gratitude. It moved him to see Tang Shan so happy, as if the honor were his own. The young villagers surrounded Xiao Long and tossed him into the air in celebration. Some time later, the village chief leaned close to Tang Shan and asked about the matter he had mentioned at the gate. Tang Shan asked what he meant. The chief said they were searching for a village with missing people. Tang Shan confirmed it and asked why. With a worried look, the chief said he wanted to repay them and had investigated, hearing a strange story. In his village, a woman had married in from elsewhere. A few years earlier, the village where her parents lived had suffered a strange phenomenon, with villagers disappearing one after another. After hearing this, Tang Shan was shocked. He looked around and murmured that they had a clue. Tang Shan immediately asked where that village was. The chief said it was a small village to the west. When they arrived, they found only desolation. Tang Shan covered his nose and said there were bodies. One attendant pointed ahead and said it seemed to be over there. Tang Shan suddenly exclaimed. The piled bodies included not only corpses but bones. He said it was too cruel, and there were even poisonous corpses, with corpse poison born from decomposition. A bearded man cried that it made his spine go cold and said not to let the young hero see it. Xiao Long said he had already seen everything. Then he suddenly noticed something and asked what was over there. He saw sharp claws and the beak of a strange bird swallowing the severed head of a snake. He lifted a stone and said he could not let that bird insult the dead. He hurled the stone at it and shouted for it to get out. Tang Shan yelled for him to wait. The stone flew past and startled the bird. It slammed its claws into the ground, its eyes full of killing intent as it prepared to attack. Tang Shan sensed something was wrong and told everyone to stop. The bird spread its wings and rose into the air, carrying a murderous aura. Xiao Long watched in panic as the bones touched by the black smoke began to melt. He murmured in disbelief that it was melting them. At once, a hand covered his mouth. Tang Shan shouted for everyone to move away because it was a Zhen Bird. Everyone immediately crouched down in a circle. Tang Shan explained that when the Zhen Bird spread its wings, it could bring death to all. Its beak shone like bronze and was sharp as a spear tip, while its body was covered in deep purple feathers. His two attendants listened with serious faces. Tang Shan continued that when angered, the spread of its wings poisoned everything around it and killed it. This species was called the Zhen Bird. Xiao Long suddenly grew excited and shouted, asking whether it was one of the 10 Great Deadly Venoms. Tang Shan nodded. Xiao Long's eyes shone with excitement. Yes, it was the foremost of the 10 Great Deadly Venoms, praised as the emperor of all poisonous animals, the Zhen Bird. Xiao Long murmured that this was terrifying. Earth's venomous insects and snakes were like cute little creatures by comparison. He joyfully said the Zhen Bird was basically a flying biological weapon and that it seemed to have been drawn here by the venomous snakes. The three others whispered that the Zhen Bird was said to eat only the heads of the most venomous snakes. Xiao Long nervously asked if that was a bad sign. Tang Shan replied that it absolutely was, because seeing a Zhen Bird even once in a lifetime was extremely difficult. It was so rare that someone might only report seeing one every 100 years. Xiao Long marveled at it, and Tang Shan asked whether he planned to catch it. The crowd was stunned. Tang Shan laughed and asked if he wanted to try capturing it. Xiao Long said yes, but considering its toxicity, Tang Shan merely smiled at him and said that if he was that interested in the 10 Great Deadly Venoms, there was a way. Xiao Long asked in surprise if there really was a way. Tang Shan said that if he successfully cultivated the Tang family's poison art, his body would become immune to all poisons and might even withstand the Zhen Bird's toxin. He explained that only their Tang family's martial art could block this poison. But the problem was that the Tang family did not teach its secret arts to outsiders. As clan head, even if he wanted to help, he could not violate the family rules. Xiao Long shouted excitedly that if he became a Tang family member, he could learn it, and if he reached 100 poison immunity, could he really resist the Zhen Bird's poison? Tang Shan confidently said yes, and if Xiao Long decided now, he would teach him devotedly and prepare the initiation gift. Others looked doubtful, but Xiao Long alone believed him. Tang Shan smiled slyly, saying that if the young hero hesitated too long, he would have to think carefully about this decision. Xiao Long flushed with excitement and firmly agreed to become part of the Tang family, asking the clan head for guidance. Tang Shan laughed loudly and asked if he meant it. Excellent. He patted Xiao Long's shoulder and said that from now on, he was part of the Tang family. At Bloodhand Rakshasa Jia Yinxiang's hideout, footprints lay near the poison. Suddenly, someone called for the clan head. The bearded man handed over a book and said it had been inside the cave. Tang Shan flipped through it, and confirmed that the blood-written text was the manual of the Bloodhand Poison Claw. Xiao Long was shocked that it was written in blood. Tang Shan put the book away and said they should return. Xiao Long asked whether he meant going to Sichuan. Tang Shan said they needed the Blue-Spotted Centipedes' inner core and the manual. Remembering the poisonous creatures he raised, Xiao Long asked if they could briefly stop by the temple so he could release his friends. Tang Shan agreed and said he would also prepare Xiao Long's luggage. He turned back and said they should set out. As Xiao Long looked behind him, he suddenly noticed something. He pointed into the cave and said there was something strange. The bearded man asked what he meant. Everyone bent down to look, and someone asked if he meant this. Everyone spoke at once. It was a Zhen Bird feather. All eyes fixed on the feather glowing with purple light. Tang Shan put on gloves and picked it up to examine it. He opened a box to store it, and said it would be a congratulatory gift for Xiao Long becoming part of the Tang family, since he seemed to like it. Xiao Long excitedly thanked him, calling him old senior, then corrected himself to clan head. Tang Shan looked back with a smile and said everything was fine, but he did not like that form of address much. After the oath ritual, they would change it to something more suitable. Xiao Long murmured about a ritual, wondering if it was like an initiation ceremony. At the same time, in the Sichuan Tang family, the injured Tang Jun was quickly supported by Tang family members. Someone reported that Tang Buqing had set out first and had now arrived. Tang Jun shouted for them to hurry and asked how Nani was. A subordinate reported that she was still alive. Tang Jun told them to take him to her at once. The room door opened, and Tang Jun appeared, calling Nani. Everyone beside the bed greeted the Grand Patriarch. Madame Tang anxiously called him father, and he replied that he had brought the medicine. Tang Jun took out the pill and said it was the inner core of the blue-spotted centipede. Madame Tang covered her mouth, trying to control her emotions, and said he had succeeded. Everyone sat around, waiting for him to give the medicine to Nani. Her face was pale, and she gasped for breath. Tang Jun called her name with pity. Holding the pill, he said they had almost been too late, but thankfully he had made it in time. Madame Tang urged him to give it to her quickly. Tang Jun slowly placed the pill into Nani's mouth. A green aura rose from her body, and he checked her pulse. Then he circulated his inner power while Madame Tang looked at her beloved daughter anxiously and whispered for her to wake. Xiao Long sat down exhausted, thinking he had heard the Central Plains was vast, but he never imagined it was this enormous. They traveled by boat from Hainan to Honglo, past Nanning, and after a month and a half finally reached Sichuan, arriving before the gates of the Tang family. Someone told the young hero this was the Sichuan Tang family. Xiao Long asked in surprise if it was true. Before him stood the magnificent Tang estate. The person explained that the entire mountain belonged to the Sichuan Tang family, so it was called Tang Family Mountain. Xiao Long could hardly believe his eyes. People from the Tang family rushed out and shouted a welcome to the clan head, making him panic and wonder if all these people were members of the Sichuan Tang family. There were so many of them. Behind the crowd, a girl in red came running. Footsteps rang out in welcome, and Tang Shan was surprised when he heard her call. Father. His beloved daughter, Nani, had woken up and rushed over to embrace him, crying. Tang Shan joyfully called her name and asked if she had recovered. She hugged him and apologized. Nani asked whether her father's body was all right. Xiao Long looked at her and murmured that this was the first time he had seen someone radiate such dazzling beauty. Tang Shan turned and said there was someone he wanted to introduce. He told Xiao Long this was his daughter, Tang Nani. Xiao Long froze, and Tang Shan continued that he still remembered what Xiao Long had said to him. The smell of fragrant grass. Nani heard this in confusion. Grass? Tang Shan pinched her head and said of course it was wild grass, leaving her startled and blushing. The two looked at each other in silence. Xiao Long remembered Tang Shan's earlier words, "My daughter is one of the 3 treasures of the Central Plains." He quickly denied it, saying he did not mean that kind of wild grass. He felt embarrassed. This was poison flower Tang Nani, the only daughter of the Tang family, and since childhood she had carried a hidden pain few people understood. In a conversation between 2 elders, one said her talent was still unclear, while the other praised her appearance, saying she was not one of the 3 beauties of the martial world. Nani hid behind a tree and quietly listened to their comments. A bearded man said they only needed a son-in-law in name, and another asked why the clan head refused to take more concubines. Those bitter words reached Nani's ears, and she murmured that it was not true, that her mother and father were not wrong. She resolved to prove her ability to the family elders by perfecting her martial arts. Although she was not male, she could still contribute to the clan. But her impatience led to mistakes, creating an inner demon that eventually left her in a coma. When she woke thanks to the medicine and Tang Jun's help, everyone around her was worried. Madame Tang joyfully said that Nani had survived. Nani wept, asking her mother what she should do and apologizing. In her heart she thought it was all over. She had wanted to become useful to the clan. Looking at Tang Jun, she said she had lost all her inner power. Tang Jun took her hand and said, "Little girl, are you not feeling guilty for causing your family pain? You have achieved what you always wanted, so stop crying and be happy." Nani asked in confusion whether he meant 100 poisons. When she raised her hand, she saw a faint blue-green aura radiating from it, and was startled. Nani asked her grandfather what it was. Tang Jun happily said he had something to tell her. Not only had the medicine saved her life, it had also helped her reach heavenly poison inner power, surpassing even 100 poisons. Nani asked if he meant wild grass. Her words made everyone laugh teasingly, while Xiao Long awkwardly muttered to himself. Tang Shan, standing beside him, smiled smugly at Xiao Long's discomfort. Xiao Long thought he should not act so proud, then forced a smile and said the clan head was very funny and that it was a pleasure to meet her. He added that he had heard she had been ill, and it was fortunate to see her healthy now. Nan-ni replied yes, then happily said it was an honor to meet him. Nan-ni introduced herself as Poison Flower Tang Nan-ni and thanked the young hero for saving her life, saying she would never forget the debt. Her introduction captivated Xiao Long, and he inwardly praised her beauty. Then he startled when he heard a voice ask what he thought. Tang Shan whispered that this was voice transmission. He continued that even wild grass could be beautiful, like a red spider lily, and asked if Xiao Long wanted to try picking it. After hearing that, Xiao Long blushed in embarrassment. The scene shifted to the bath, where Xiao Long soaked in hot water and relaxed. The little centipedes slept soundly in a basin. Xiao Long muttered that this would kill him. When he saw one baby centipede wake up, he complained that they usually clung to him all day, and hot water was not good for their bodies. He asked whether they wanted to stay in the tub for a while. They crawled in as if they understood, and seeing the adorable scene, Xiao Long thought it was strange that they seemed to understand some of his words. He laughed, and said staring at his naked body like that would make someone embarrassed. They suddenly panicked and hid in the tub, making him laugh and mutter that they were funny. Xiao Long sighed, recalling what old Jiao Bai had said about the centipedes. These creatures were considered spiritual beasts. Then he remembered Tang Shan's words about the red spider lily being beautiful and whether he wanted to pick it. Unable to calm down, he decided to leave immediately. In the Tang Hall, everyone was sitting together discussing something. Tang Shan lifted his teacup and said they should arrange everything properly. Tang Jun shook his head, asking if such a young hero could truly be so talented. Tang Shan answered yes, saying they had encountered a fortunate opportunity, and that opportunity was the young hero. His understanding of poisonous creatures was extraordinary. Not only had he killed Zhao Yunxiang, he had also encountered a legendary spiritual beast like the Zhen Bird. Madame Tang and Nan Ni both looked surprised. Tang Shan said the young hero had even hatched blue-spotted centipede eggs by himself. Tang Jun laughed, saying he had not expected to overlook such a treasure. Tang Shan nodded in agreement. Then he called Nan Ni, startling her. Tang Shan asked what she thought of taking the young hero as a son-in-law. Nan Ni asked if he meant making him their son-in-law. She began to say that if he were a son-in-law, then stopped suddenly, lowering her eyes as she waited. In her heart, she thought that now she had surpassed 100 poisons and reached heavenly poison, she wanted to prove she could help the clan even more. At last, she said that she too was part of the Tang family, so she understood why he was saying this. Nan Ni struck the table, speaking loudly while tears welled in her eyes. She asked whether the young hero was truly worthy of her, and said she had to verify it herself. With that, she ran out, leaving everyone in the room worried. Tang Shan stood up, sensing trouble, and warned the young hero to be careful. Watching his daughter's figure, he murmured that even a beautiful red spider lily carried sharp thorns. Nan Ni thought that she could now aim for the heavenly poison body. If she stopped here, she would never be recognized by the family elders. She would carefully verify everything about his character. Meanwhile, after finishing his bath, Xiao Long sat outside enjoying the breeze and wondered what was going on. With a gloomy face, Xiao Long said he seemed to have left a bad impression on the young lady from a great family. He rubbed the blue-spotted centipede on his chest and asked what their father should do now. Suddenly, Nan Ni called for the young hero from behind, making him jump. Because she had run over, she was short of breath. Xiao Long asked if something was wrong, and she apologized for disturbing him, saying she was in a hurry. Seeing Xiao Long's confused face, Nan Ni asked if she could borrow his hand. Xiao Long immediately held it out, but then hesitated, blushed, and said he did not know what she needed, but perhaps this should wait until they were closer. He awkwardly added that such things required mutual understanding. Nan Ni asked what he meant. Then she suddenly blushed and loudly denied it, asking what he was talking about. Xiao Long sighed and murmured that perhaps it was not that. The romantic glow of the sunset could not save the tense atmosphere between them. Nan Ni sighed and said it was not what he thought, she only wanted to check his pulse. Because she had suddenly asked for his hand, he had misunderstood. Xiao Long laughed awkwardly and said he understood now. Nan Ni sat down and first apologized for appearing so suddenly, and acting improperly. Looking at Xiao Long, she noticed how young he was, almost not yet an adult, yet he had a mature way of thinking. So she decided to explain the current situation. Xiao Long stammered that it was fine. After listening to Nan Ni's explanation, Xiao Long felt as if he had stepped into a familiar period drama. She was the only direct descendant of the family, constantly resisting schemes from the branch lines. To ensure the clan's survival, the elders had decided to select an outstanding son-in-law. Xiao Long nodded, realizing they had even calculated his position in the family if he joined. Nan Ni continued that she wanted to apologize first, but there was something she needed to confirm with him. Scratching her head, she said that even if things did not go as she wished, she had no intention of treating him badly. He was her benefactor, so they would treat him as an honored guest, or perhaps become sworn siblings. Xiao Long was surprised by the proposal. He held out his hand with a smile and said he understood, and she could confirm whatever she needed. Nan Ni fell silent for a moment, then took his pulse, and said they would begin. A strange aura suddenly spread around her, startling Xiao Long. Nan Ni explained that not everyone could master the Tang family's martial arts. A few could accept poisons and learn the family's secret techniques, while others could not do so at all. Using the poison ranks of heavenly poison, 100 poisons, 10 poisons, and 5 poisons, she explained that Tang poison arts required the learner to gradually adapt to poisons as inner power increased. Only by accepting them all could one reach complete understanding. After taking his pulse, Nan Ni said that fortunately his body could learn poison arts. However, it was only a 10-poison body, meaning he could withstand only 10 kinds of poison. For someone outside the Tang family, having a 10-poison body was already impressive. But Xiao Long fell silent at the news. Nan Ni stood and continued that in overall strength, he could only be considered a first-class martial artist, the highest level a normal person without innate talent could reach. She bowed and said she had to leave. Xiao Long stood and told her to take care. Deep in thought, he wondered if he really had a 10-poison body. Then he suddenly exclaimed that this meant he would not be able to catch the Zhen Bird, which was a serious problem. After leaving the bath, Nan Ni wrapped herself in a cloth and sighed in relief. She glanced at her body, wondering why it had carried such a strange scent ever since she absorbed the Blue-Spotted Centipede's inner core. She was even bathing several times a day. After dressing, she wondered if this was punishment for speaking disrespectfully to her benefactor. The scene shifted to Xiao Long's bedroom, where he was sleeping deeply and seemed to be dreaming. Suddenly, he found himself in a place filled with cherry blossom trees. From afar, he heard crying. Someone thanked him deeply and called Miss Nan Ni, then thanked their benefactor again and again. Xiao Long murmured, wondering if he was dreaming. A girl said he was not. It might feel like a dream, but it was not. The Blue-Spotted Centipede knelt, and said she had merely borrowed the form of the young woman who had received her inner core so he would not be frightened. She was the mother of these children, the Blue-Spotted Centipede. Xiao Long asked in confusion if she was the Blue-Spotted Centipede. At his feet were the adorable children, and he panicked, saying they had scared him and asking when they had arrived. He looked at them and asked if they were her children, and whether all of them were girls. Kneeling on one knee, he asked why they had entered his dream. She hesitated. The Blue-Spotted Centipede angrily said she had been brutally murdered, leaving her children behind. That grievance had reached heaven, and her soul remained inside the inner core. When the girl absorbed that core, her curse appeared through the girl's body, and with the chance for revenge arriving, she had appeared in Xiao Long's dream. The Blue-Spotted Centipede gratefully said that thanks to him, she had been able to bring her children to him, her benefactor. After hearing her out, Xiao Long said he understood. Inwardly, he thought that he had ultimately been the one who revealed her location to others. With a worried expression, Xiao Long said he had not meant to do it, but no matter what, he was connected to the Blue-Spotted Centipede's death. Seeing the pity in her eyes, the Blue-Spotted Centipede asked whether, if he did not mind, he could fulfill one wish for her. Holding a sleeping child, Xiao Long firmly replied that of course he would grant any wish she had. She stroked her child's head and asked whether he could care for her children until they matured. Xiao Long asked whether centipedes could not live independently after molting twice from the mother's body. She said that was true for lower creatures, but her kind was different. She comforted her children and explained that before her clan's young molted twice, they depended heavily on the mother's inner core energy. After that, they developed by absorbing true energy from other living beings. Xiao Long wondered if, since Miss Nan Ni had absorbed the core, the children needed to stay near her. The centipede answered seriously that he needed to understand their situation. She asked if she had mentioned cursing that girl earlier. Xiao Long nervously said yes, and she continued that because of her inner core, the girl's body was giving off a foul smell. Xiao Long froze and repeated, "A foul smell?" With an evil expression, the Blue-Spotted Centipede said she would not let any man approach that girl, preventing her from bearing children. Xiao Long cried out in horror. She continued that if he wanted to undo the curse, he should let her children absorb the death energy of the inner core. Perhaps he could even use the chance to win the girl's heart. Xiao Long rested his chin on his hand, thought for a moment, and smiled, saying he did not think that was right. He did not want to take advantage of Miss Nani's difficult situation. The Blue-Spotted Centipede acknowledged that he was a respectable person. Then she seriously asked how he planned to overcome this trial. The girls seemed to be searching for a strong man, and the centipede also noted that she could not give him the inner core of one of the 10 Great Deadly Venoms because it had already been absorbed by the girl. Xiao Long murmured in surprise. 10 Great Deadly Venoms. Then he smiled and said he had an idea, asking whether she could trust him. She asked what he meant. Xiao Long stroked the child's head and told her to leave it to him. He thought it would work. The next day, after hearing Xiao Long's story, Nani was surprised. So the scent from her body came from the blue-spotted centipede's inner core. Xiao Long brought the centipede children and confirmed it. If she let these centipedes stay near her for a few days and absorb the core's energy, the scent would disappear on its own. She shyly said it felt awkward to ask, but since he was telling her this without asking for anything in return, should he not request some compensation? Xiao Long smiled and said he could not bear to exploit each other's hardship, and he did not want to become shameless. She was surprised by that answer and lowered her head in silence for a while. At last, she decided that she could not continue receiving his kindness without responding. Nani said seriously that she would consider her father's words. Xiao Long had helped her realize there were things more important than talent or martial arts. Xiao Long shyly scratched his head and said that, actually, he had also been thinking about something. When she asked what, he awkwardly said she had told him he had a 10-poison body and could absorb a limited number of poisons, right? Nani sighed and confirmed it. Xiao Long looked at the children and asked if, since he could absorb only 10 poisons, he could receive the poisons of the 10 Great Deadly Venoms of the Central Plains. Nani asked curiously if he meant using 10 poisons from the 10 Great Deadly Venoms. She blushed and murmured that he wanted to become the strongest under heaven. For Tang Nani, one of the 3 flowers of the martial world, this was the first time a man had expressed such bold feelings to her. The sky looked gloomy, yet sunlight pierced the thick clouds and fell on the pavilion roof outside. The two sat on the steps discussing something. Hoa Nan looked confused and asked whether the young hero knew what he was saying. He stayed silent under Hoa Nan's gaze for a while, then scratched his head and laughed as if clueless, saying he did not know. She grew even more impatient with him. Turning to face him, she placed both hands on her chest and said this path was full of hardships and trials, and it might take 10 years, 20 years, or even an entire lifetime to pursue. Xiao Long sat beside her with a blank look, suddenly wondering if it was really that serious. Covering her face with both hands, she let out a shy hum. Then she said that young hero Xiao Long was said to be only 15, so in 3 more years, when he came of age, the wedding could be held. With innocent eyes, Xiao Long listened to Hoa Nan speak of the future in the shy tone of a young girl. Over the next 3 years, if he successfully subdued one of the 10 great venomous beasts, he might earn everyone's absolute trust. If all went smoothly, his goal would be very achievable. Blushing, she tapped her fingers together and tried to talk about the wedding, then suddenly sprang up and shouted that she would support him no matter what. Xiao Long, sitting beside her, was so startled that he leaned away. After saying this, she ran outside without looking back, leaving only a quick farewell. Xiao Long sat there dumbfounded and could only call after her. Miss Hoa Nan. She turned back in surprise and asked if he still had something to say. Xiao Long smiled innocently, patted the spot beside him, and seemed to radiate Buddha-like light as he said that for treatment, she only needed to stay 1 more hour and should endure it before leaving. His words froze Hoa Nan like a statue, as if cracks were spreading across her. She helplessly shouted at his foolishness, her body stiff and fists clenched, then walked back step by step. Her face burned red from embarrassment, while Xiao Long thought she was afraid of the little worms on him and quickly reassured her that they absolutely would not bite. He then turned to the worms on his hand and called them his darlings, and they rose up in response. Xiao Long translated their words, making Hoa Nan flinch. They were asking whether, instead of listening to father, they should go talk to mother. The keywords echoed with too much joy, father and mother. Hearing that, Xiao Long panicked and loudly denied it. In the study, the 3 parents sat facing one another, discussing seriously. It seemed the young hero's talent had not yet won their daughter's heart. Tang Jun asked Madame Tang sternly whether she had seen it that morning. There seemed to be something between them. He fell into thought, stroking his silver beard, then said that forcing the marriage might not be proper and it would be better to let their feelings develop naturally. Madame Tang immediately had an idea and asked her husband why they did not put Hoa Nan in charge of guiding the young hero's martial arts. If they met often, feelings might grow. Tang Jun said it was not a bad idea. The Tang clan had nodded, saying he would ask Yi Xianxing whether there was a chance to grant some cleansing or training opportunity that could bring them closer. Tang Shan worthily reminded them that Hoa Nan was not very interested in such matters, and his father might be expecting too much. The old man crossed his arms, snorted, closed his eyes, and said they should try anyway. Tang Shan reluctantly agreed. Outside the door, a familiar figure appeared. She called out that his daughter Hoa Nan requested an audience with her father, startling the three people inside. They wondered why she had come at this hour. Tang Shan regained his composure and told her to enter. She pushed the door open without hesitation. Seeing the three parents sitting seriously, she became flustered and swallowed. Hoa Nan leaned back and stammered that everyone was here together. The three stared at her in confusion. She straightened, cupped her hands respectfully, and said she had something to report. Tang Shan asked in surprise what she wanted to report. Thinking about what she was about to say, she grew shy, blushed, and stammered until her throat seemed stuck. She finally said she would follow what her father had instructed. Clenching her hands to gather courage, she blurted it out. Tang Shan could only make a confused sound, his face stiff, then asked what words of his she meant. Madame Tang cheerfully pulled her daughter closer, impatient to hear the story Hoa Nan could not finish. She asked if young hero Xiao Long had caught her eye. Hoa Nan froze, her face changing colors like a chameleon. Just when it had calmed, it flushed red again under her parents' delighted reactions. They asked why this was so sudden when she had said before that she did not like him. Her father's bluntness left Hoa Nan at a loss. She tapped her fingers together in embarrassment before finally saying that young hero Xiao Long had promised to become the strongest under heaven for her. Her words made both parents excitedly ask, "The strongest under heaven?" Tang Shan stroked his short beard with interest, and told her to explain clearly. At her father's request, Hoa Nan honestly told them that although her innate talent was not outstanding, the young hero had vowed for her sake to subdue all 10 poisons and had made that promise to her. The Tang clan head burst into laughter at the strange but proud statement. 10 poisons? That boy truly did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Her mother also teased that someone like that actually existed, making Hoa Nan's face burn red like a boiled shrimp. However, a second later, she regained herself and explained that although she had accepted him in her heart, the marriage would only be approved after young hero Xiao Long came of age and subdued one of the 10 poisons. She looked at all three to see if they understood. The parents were all happily supportive. They said a few poisons were only natural, and if she was their daughter, he had to do at least that much. Madame Tang added that men did seem rather insensitive. Hearing this, Hoa Nan suddenly understood and asked whether she needed to explain it to him again. Her mother patted her head and gently taught her that the young hero had not realized the matter was already approved, so he should try a little harder for her daughter. Tang Jun also said happily that they should first treat him as a son-in-law and pretend not to know about this. If he worked that hard, he would soon become part of the family. Only then did they seem satisfied. Elsewhere, Xiao Long's hand was tightly held as an excited voice praised him, saying he was truly worthy of admiration and had completely conquered her heart. The praise made Xiao Long shy, and he scratched his head with an awkward smile, saying it was only courage and determination. The face before him looked exactly like Hoa Nan's, except for a green diamond-shaped jewel on her forehead. After a minute of silence, she said this might be the final time, because her resentment had been resolved and her soul would soon be released. Holding the 3 children jumping beside him, Xiao Long said he understood. Standing still as her hair fluttered in the wind, she asked whether she could help him with anything. If possible, they would do anything for him. He placed a hand near his mouth as if thinking and asked whether, if she did not mind, he could look at her for a bit. His request made her blush and clutch her clothes, thinking that her benefactor was indeed a true man, though outwardly she hesitantly agreed. Then she did not hesitate to pull down her robe, wondering if her benefactor was weak before beauty. Seeing this, Xiao Long's face darkened and he stopped her in panic, asking if she really needed to undress. This time she was the confused one, wondering what he meant. The children automatically covered their eyes as she said she would not undress if that made him more comfortable. Xiao Long shouted that this was not what he meant. He only wanted to see the true form of the blue-spotted centipede. Afraid of further misunderstanding, he frankly made his request, leaving her puzzled. Only then did she understand Xiao Long. She hesitantly said that if it was that, then the scene changed in the next instant. Xiao Long's excited shout echoed everywhere as her body transformed magnificently. From a beautiful girl, she became a giant centipede spirit and asked coyly whether this would do, benefactor. Xiao Long let out an exhausted breath, his eyes blazing with excitement. It was real, and it was truly huge. He asked whether he could touch it a little. As he rubbed his hands, the centipede was speechless and said he had already touched it. Once he had touched it, Xiao Long demanded more and asked if he could keep a little piece. He wondered how such a huge body could support itself on those joints. When it walked, did the front legs really light up? Hearing this, the centipede waved its short front legs shyly and wondered what he meant by front legs. Seeing the cue movement, Xiao Long got excited and asked if he could touch its legs too. The centipede was speechless again, reminding him that he had already touched them. Now in his field of expertise, Xiao Long grew more and more excited, asking rapid-fire questions. How strong was its poison? What about its eyes? Did it see with eyes or sense with antennae? The three children were still covering their eyes, not from shyness but because they could not bear to watch. The centipede could only answer vaguely, saying of course, before letting out a startled cry. Staring at the sharp fang, Xiao Long clenched his fists and asked if he could touch the venom fang just once. That made the centipede freeze. She reminded him that it might be rather dangerous. Xiao Long immediately attacked with a cute tone, saying she had promised to grant any request. The centipede shook her head in embarrassment, asking what he was saying. She wondered whether her daughters would truly be all right. His hand reached out, his face full of desire, admiring the shine of that chitin shell. Everything was clearly abnormal. Tang Taizhan clasped his hands near his chin, his expression softening, and said that since he had heard the story from Hoanan, from now on Xiao Long was his child. Hearing the warm yet powerful voice, Xiao Long looked at Hoanan beside him in surprise. She listened to her father, a gentle smile on her small face. Xiao Long knew she would not help him, so he awkwardly tried to explain that there was still the 3-year trial. Before he finished, Tang Taizhan cut him off, giving him no chance to refuse. The wedding would be held once he came of age, of course. Xiao Long helplessly waved his hands, saying that was not what he meant. Madame Tang sat beside them, cradling her graceful older face with one hand, smiling as she quickly joined in. A son-in-law? Xiao Long, welcome again. I am your mother-in-law. Even the Tang clan had joined the excitement, his hair already white but his eyes shining as he smiled. Now Hoanan had a beloved, and from now on the Tang family would meet only good fortune. Seeing her whole family support the marriage, Xiao Long did not know what to say. He glanced at Hoanan and softly called her name. She did not answer, but a small smile appeared on her face. He thought he had seen wrong, but when he looked more carefully, her face had returned to its cold indifference. Xiao Long was startled. What was going on? She had clearly set conditions for the marriage, so why were they acting as if she had accepted? Not knowing the situation, he secretly decided to go along with her wishes for now. With that thought, he recovered, scratched his head, and smiled shyly, asking everyone to look after him. He expected the atmosphere to become more awkward after that, or at least for him to be the only embarrassed one. But old Master Tang and his son paid him no attention. The two older men immediately smiled and began discussing matters. The scene left a huge question mark in Xiao Long's mind. After talking with his father, Tang Shan looked at him and said that before he learned the Tang family's poison art, there was something he wanted to show him. Xiao Long turned in surprise and asked what it was. Seeing his cute expression, the two adults laughed and looked at each other. As clan head, Tang Shan looked serious and told him it was the Hall of 10,000 Poisons, guaranteeing he would like it. The 4 members of the Tang family stood in line, with Xiao Long walking at the back after old Master Tang. As Xiao Long curiously observed the rear garden, Tang Jun said they had been waiting for this moment. He happily told Xiao Long that this was the moment he would officially enter the Hall of 10,000 Poisons as a member of the Tang family. It was their tradition for the whole family to come together. Xiao Long excitedly said he was looking forward to it too, grandfather. His breathing suddenly quickened, and his face flushed with anticipation. He imagined the hall storing countless kinds of poisons, which was thrilling. Before he could finish thinking, Xiao Long suddenly looked at Hoanan, and could hardly believe his eyes. The beautiful young woman stood out beneath the morning sun, her charm and graceful figure leaving him secretly amazed. His face flushed uncontrollably, and he thought that a beauty seen from the side was even more like a painting. Hoanan's parents had somehow been watching his reactions. Instead of scolding him like most parents, they chuckled when they saw their future son-in-law nearly fall for their daughter. Tang Shan suddenly teased him, saying he was staring so much today that his daughter would feel shy. Now that Xiao Long was family, why was he still standing there in a daze? It seemed their son-in-law had fallen for Hoanan. Hoanan reminded him that he needed to watch the road. Xiao Long answered in flustered embarrassment. A moment later, they arrived before a room built into the mountain, guarded by 3 very sturdy men. As they approached, Xiao Long noticed a Chak and a Dao standing guard with bulging muscles and solemn faces. A warrior stepped forward, cupped his hands, and greeted the Grand Patriarch. Tang Jun immediately said he wanted to show his grandson-in-law the Hall of 10,000 Poisons and ordered the doors opened. The 3 guards obeyed quickly. Xiao Long watched everything in surprise, thinking security here was stricter than in the Middle Ages. After receiving the order, the only clothed man there shouted to open the doors. 2 guards immediately used all their muscular strength to pull open the huge doors, and it took tremendous effort. A guard asked why they were opening so early today. Xiao Long stared at the 2 mighty guards and wondered if opening a door really had to be this hard. When the doors were fully open, a Chak and a Dao were panting and soaked with sweat. Once everything was ready, the guard turned back and invited them inside. Tang Shan quickly nodded to Xiao Long and said they should enter. As they stepped in, he explained that this iron gate was made from southern barbarian Wu steel, and being able to open it was a great honor. Xiao Long answered in surprise. Once everyone was inside, Tang Shan proudly said they had arrived. Xiao Long opened his eyes wide and looked around in amazement. Tang Shan continued that this was the treasure vault containing all kinds of poisons from the Sichuan Tang family. Tang Jun repeated that this was the 10,000 poison hall within the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. He warned Xiao Long not to touch anything. Xiao Long asked curiously whether all these poisons were stored in jars and medicine bags. Tang Shan said yes, there were many different poisons here, such as Ma Shi poison and sleeping death poison. As he spoke, Tang Shan kicked Xiao Long toward Hoanan and told her to explain things to him, saying their grandson-in-law would surely like that better. Madame Tang agreed. Hoanan did not object. She only blushed slightly and answered yes, father. She pulled Xiao Long around the 10,000 poison hall, and said she would show him the strongest poisons of the Tang sect. Starting with little golden dust, she grew more embarrassed as she spoke. This was a poison powder that martial artists had to be extremely careful of. If inhaled, one could not use inner power. She also showed him heartbreak poison, soul-destroying poison, fire-blood poison, and 7-step soul-severing poison. Seeing their daughter point out countless powerful Tang poisons, Hoanan's parents smiled proudly. The 2 of them looked adorable. Meanwhile, Hoanan grew serious and said that all of these were strong poisons, but the Tang sect's strongest poison was something else. Then she handed Xiao Long a tiny bean and told him to hold it. Looking at the little bean in his palm, Xiao Long still felt confused and asked what it was. Hoanan explained that excluding the poisons of the 10 great venomous beasts, this was currently the strongest poison. It was the herb symbolizing the Tang sect, the castor bean. Xiao Long was baffled at first and wondered about castor oil. It was actually ricin, an extremely powerful toxin. Just 2 milligrams could kill an adult. Xiao Long was still stunned, asking if it was hundreds of thousands of times stronger than cyanide. Hoanan smiled and said this poison came closest to the Tang sect's ideal of colorless, tasteless, and invisible. That was why it was considered a golden poison, the most precious type. Killing someone with it was called a golden kill. After hearing this, Xiao Long suddenly felt as though flames were blazing around Hoanan, and he heard her warn him to remember it well. The strongest poison was not necessarily the one that caused the most pain or terror, but the one that killed silently and certainly. The poison arts of the Sichuan Tang family aimed for exactly that, silence and certainty. Images of the Tang family members surged through Xiao Long's mind, making him realize this was a clan of assassins. Immediately after, a voice cut into their conversation. Tang Jun called from afar that this was enough, and next they should go see the poisonous creatures Xiao Long had been waiting for. Xiao Long immediately brightened. Poisonous creatures? The old master encouraged him, saying that if he liked them, he could manage them, and the family would support him in everything. Xiao Long was so excited he stammered, asking if they would really support his hobby. Tang Jun quickly called everyone to go at once. But before he finished speaking, urgent news arrived from afar and stopped them. Jiao Bai ran to Tang Shan in a panic. Tang Shan asked what had happened, and after catching his breath, Jiao Bai said Tang Shan needed to go to Xuanwu Pavilion immediately. Tang Shan asked why they had to go to Xuanwu Pavilion. Jiao Bai quickly explained that the family elders were waiting. Hearing this, Tang Jun angrily shouted that it was them again. Xiao Long remembered the elders Hoanan had mentioned, and Jiubai quickly added that there were two matters. First, the medicine they sent to the Sichuan city lord had not worked, and he had sent a complaint letter. Second, Jiubai glanced awkwardly at Xiao Long. Xiao Long sighed and unexpectedly said frankly that it was about the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. Tang Jun was not too surprised and said the news had spread fast. Then he left with everyone and reminded Xiao Long to come along too, calling him grandson-in-law. At last, they reached Xuanwu Pavilion, where many elderly people were loudly discussing matters. When everyone arrived, one of them loudly called Tang Shan's name. Before even greeting him, they began scolding him. How could he decide such an important matter on his own? How could he marry their precious Hoanan to an orphan child of unknown origin? Tang Shan angrily repeated the words orphan of unknown origin. He exploded in anger and defended Xiao Long, asking if they were insulting his son-in-law. The elders quickly argued back that it was not what they meant, but it was the truth. Tang Jun stepped forward and asked if they had any objections to his decision. The senior panicked and called him Grand Patriarch. Xiao Long heard the malicious attack and looked displeased. The elder begged the Grand Patriarch to advise the clan head, but Tang Jun said he had already agreed. Seeing the smile vanish from Xiao Long's face, Hoanan quietly apologized for the trouble today. Xiao Long sighed, realizing he had made her worry again. While the seniors continued arguing, he suddenly spoke, apologizing for interrupting the elders' conversation. He said seriously that this seemed to be due to his own lack of ability. Then he slapped his own shoulder and shouted that if he could demonstrate his ability, would the elders accept him? A senior in the distance exclaimed in surprise. With a confident expression, Xiao Long declared that he could, for example, solve the Sichuan city lord's difficult problem. Hoanan and Madame Tang worried about him and anxiously scolded him, asking what he intended to do. Although he was not someone obsessed with face, if anyone dared disturb his peaceful life beside his pets, he would not forgive them. In the great courtyard, everyone stirred because Xiao Long dared argue with the elders. A white-haired elder shouted that the elders were speaking, and how dare a child like him interrupt. Many others joined in criticizing him, asking if he even knew what was written in the Sichuan city lord's letter. Nan Ni and Madame Tang watched the argument. One elder said that Xiao Long had no background yet dared interfere in their affairs, which was why they had recommended a son-in-law from a famous family. Hearing this, Xiao Long grew tired of them and thought these old men were going too far. He remembered live streaming and receiving positive comments from over 1 million followers and an average of 3,000 live viewers. With confidence, Xiao Long answered the elders. Since they had not yet recognized him as the Tang family's son-in-law, he was still a guest. Xiao Long continued, impressing even Tang Shan. He had not only helped Hoanan, the Tang family's treasure, but also saved the clan head's life by killing bloodhand Rakshasa Jia Yunxiang. Cupping his hands respectfully, he asked whether insulting a benefactor and honored guest in public was the Tang family's etiquette. In the world of streaming, being attacked by many people was nothing unusual for Xiao Long. It had become part of his life, and with rich experience, he handled the situation instantly. The irritated elders suddenly faltered. One coughed, rubbed his neck, and said that was not what they meant. Perhaps they had spoken too rashly. Xiao Long tilted his head slightly and smiled in contempt, thinking they were useless. Still, some remained doubtful, saying that killing bloodhand Rakshasa Jia Yunxiang was too absurd. Tang Shan, who supported Xiao Long, brought evidence, and said Xiao Long was not lying. When he showed the book, the man beside him gaped in shock. As the book opened, everyone was stunned to recognize the Bloodhand Poison Claw manual written in blood, clearly belonging to the blood cult. Tang Shan smiled at his son-in-law and asked Xiao Long to show them the centipedes. Xiao Long obediently answered, "Yes, father-in-law," making everyone even more curious. He called out his treasures. A dazzling glow gathered around his hand as the adorable little creatures emerged from his clothes and chirped to prove their presence. Everyone around him stared in disbelief at the golden centipedes. Tang Shan quickly explained that they were the children of the Blue-Spotted Centipede and were being raised by his son-in-law. If he said they had bitten Jia Yunxiang to death, would they believe it? The elders reeled at the news, wondering if this young man could truly control Blue-Spotted Centipedes. Tang Shan did not hesitate. If he could not recognize this son-in-law, what should he call him? Xiao Long also looked smug and told his babies not to bite anyone. The elders were now too shocked to say much. Finally they changed direction, saying they had never refused to recognize him, only that proper procedures had to be followed. Because the clan had skipped them, they were upset. Tang Jun sighed and said he would let the son-in-law matter pass, but asked why they opposed the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. The elders argued that Xiao Long was not officially a family member yet, so how could they entrust the hall to an underage youth? Hearing this, Tang Jun also hesitated. The Hall of 10,000 Poisons was indeed too important to entrust casually. He quickly offered a solution. Could Xiao Long prove his ability? Xiao Long answered that of course he could. He confidently declared that to prove he was worthy of the Tang family, he would solve the matter in the Tang family's way. That meant using poison. Hearing this, everyone clutched their heads in fear. They began whispering, asking if he intended to poison the Sichuan city lord. They were talking about sending medicine, not killing someone. Even Tang Jun and Tang Shan looked confused, and Xiao Long innocently asked what the clan had thought. Inwardly, Tang Jun thought he was far too soft. No, the Tang family had to use poison. The next day arrived, and Xiao Long trained with Tang Jun. The old man said that regardless of the challenge, Xiao Long would begin learning the Tang family's 5 poisons return to origin art that day. Hearing this, Xiao Long cheered excitedly. But when he thought about training, he wondered whether it was still physical training. Tang Jun said the body would naturally adapt to the martial art as he practiced. The Tang sect valued practicality, so Xiao Long would learn things he could use immediately in real combat. Tang Jun presented the powerful hidden weapons passed down by the clan, introducing darts, needles, coins, pellets, knives, swords, and blades. There were many other hidden weapons, but these 5 types were the main ones. Tang Jun asked which hidden weapon was easiest to use. Xiao Long hesitantly guessed throwing knives or daggers. Tang Jun accepted the answer, then asked which was hardest. Xiao Long looked at the small pouch and guessed powder, since it had to be scattered. Tang Jun nodded and said that was wrong. The hardest was the needle. Xiao Long exclaimed in surprise, asking if it was because needles were small and thin, making them hard to throw. Tang Jun explained that it was because he had to remember exactly where he had thrown each one. He said it would be better to demonstrate while explaining. Xiao Long was stunned as Tang Jun pulled out a writing brush. With practiced skill, the old man disassembled it piece by piece, and in an instant the brush vanished into fragments scattering through the air. Xiao Long marveled at the sight. The fragments were light as feathers and pure white, and he had never imagined something so soft could transform into sharp pieces that attacked the ground. Tang Jun calmly crossed his arms and watched, while Xiao Long fearfully pulled up his legs. Seeing it, he thought those hairs were stabbing into his skin like needles. His eyes went round as he watched the feather-like needles dance in a sharp, deadly pattern. Tang Jun explained that the Tang sect had a hidden weapon technique called sky-filling flower rain, a secret art that covered the entire surrounding area with hundreds or thousands of fine needles. At that point, Xiao Long was terrified. Did that mean he had to fight enemies while surrounded by needles? And if needles were everywhere, where could he put his feet? Tang Jun nodded and said he had to remember carefully so he would not injure himself. Xiao Long thought this was insane and asked whether he had to remember even the locations of needles knocked away by the enemy or fallen to the ground. Tang Jun nodded, saying of course. Tang Jun added that for the 5 poisons level, one had to remember at least about 100 positions. Ho Anan had remembered 1,000 as a child prodigy. Xiao Long could only click his tongue. The scene shifted to a clear mountain peak beneath a calm sky, filled with fresh air and energy. Yet Xiao Long lay exhausted face down on the floor. Ho Anan approached and asked if he was all right. He greeted Miss Ho Anan. He asked what she was doing, and she quickly said she had heard he planned to catch bumblebees, so she had prepared. If he did not need her help, he cut in and said it was fine, because he had planned to wait, but with her help he could catch one himself. She was surprised. Wait? She asked if he planned to wait for bumblebees. Xiao Long said she would understand when they got there, leaving Ho Anan still confused. Xiao Long asked whether she knew where a bumblebee nest was. She said she had found one nearby and they could go right away. Then she hesitated and asked if he had read the Sichuan city lord's letter. He confirmed he had. She then asked, since he was still young, whether he had fully understood the contents. Xiao Long replied that of course he did, because the matter was very important to a man's yang energy. Hearing this, she shyly told him to stop and asked whether he really understood the issue. Yes. The big problem the Sichuan city lord faced was impotence. Ho Anan praised Xiao Long for knowing so much at his age. He stammered that it was because he lived alone. Suddenly she ran ahead, saying they should hurry, forcing Xiao Long to chase after her while calling her name. The two entered the deep forest, where grass was thick and wildflowers bloomed along the path. Xiao Long was drawn to a small animal climbing nearby, so much that Hoa Nan quickly grabbed him by the collar to stop him. They stopped at one place. Hoa Nan said they had arrived, and Xiao Long answered that this was the place. While putting on protective gear, Hoa Nan asked Xiao Long what meaning there was in finding a bee nest without bees. He explained to his future wife that although they were looking for bumblebees, they were not going to catch the bees. She exclaimed in surprise. The two carefully searched through the gaps between the rocks. Looking deep into the hole, Xiao Long told her that the poisonous insect they needed usually lived in small bee nests. Hoa Nan asked if a poisonous insect lived inside a bee nest. He confirmed it, then spotted something and happily said this nest seemed to have one. With swift movements, he used chopsticks to pick up the tiny prey and cheered that he had caught the little guy. Hoa Nan stared in surprise and asked whether that insect was what she thought. Xiao Long continued that they had not come to catch bumblebees, but to catch this insect. Excitedly, he said this creature would help solve the Sichuan city lord's problem. Looking at the insect in Xiao Long's hand, Hoa Nan asked doubtfully whether it was a D-dam. Hearing her guess, he raised the trembling insect in front of her, and happily confirmed it. Inwardly, he wondered if this was what they called D-dam here. He brought the insect closer for her to see. It looked pitiful, with wet eyes and a shaking body. He explained that this insect was often found in bumblebee nests. In the Central Plains it was called D-dam, while in Korea it was known as a blister beetle, from the Meloidae family. Hoa Nan asked why D-dam lived in bumblebee nests, saying she had not known that. Xiao Long happily explained that their life cycle was special. Meloidae reproduction was very strange. Most creatures protect their eggs or create safe places for them to hatch, but not this species. Their small yellow oval eggs can appear anywhere, from rock ledges to leaves. They can even be found in barren or overgrown places. They simply lay eggs and do not worry about them. Somehow, the blister beetle larvae hatch and crawl to the highest nearby point. Once they reach the top, they cling together and pretend to be a flower. But Xiao Long warned not to search for blister beetle larvae online. When a pretty bumblebee goes looking for nectar and sees them, she happily thinks she has found a flower. Believing it to be a real flower, the bee continues gathering pollen. Meanwhile, the larvae disguised as flowers turn sinister, knowing what she will do next. Their wicked little hands reach for the bee, and the moment she comes close, they latch onto her, bringing disaster back to the bumblebee nest. Pointing to the D-dam in his hand, Xiao Long said he did not know why they chose bumblebees, but he had heard it was the best environment for D-dam larvae to grow. Hoa Nan hesitated, then bent down sadly and said the cute bumblebees were pitiful. Xiao Long smiled and comforted her, saying this was simply the law of nature. She suddenly remembered something and asked whether this was not the poison that caused burning blisters. She knew that eating too much could kill. Xiao Long smiled and confirmed that it could cause blistering. He described wounds caused by the orange fluid from a blister beetle's body, explaining that when it touched skin, it produced burn-like blisters. Looking at the pitiful D-dam, Hoa Nan's face gradually turned red. She pressed her lips together, covered her mouth, and softly asked whether it really had that effect. Xiao Long said yes, until the poison was expelled from the body. Seeing her expression, Xiao Long narrowed his eyes and joked that it could make men rise again. Hoa Nan quickly turned and ran away, her face bright red, shouting with her eyes shut that they should go back to the Hall of 10,000 Poisons. Xiao Long shouted in surprise for her to wait because he still needed to catch a few more. A while later, Xiao Long had caught more D-dam. After returning to the Hall of 10,000 Poisons, he instructed the warriors on how to prepare the medicine. Looking at the people before him, he said slowly for them to listen carefully. First, dry the D-dam and grind them into powder. As he spoke, everyone's expressions grew serious. Calculations ran through their minds as he analyzed the dose. If eating 3 fin equaled 11.75 milligrams of toxin, it would certainly endanger life. For every gene, or 3.75 kilograms of body weight, if one ate 3/10 of a fin, or 1.25 milligrams, half of those who consumed it would die. He concluded that the medicine should be prepared at 1/10 of a fin, or 0.375 milligrams, roughly 10 drops of water, or 0.351 milliliters. After speaking, he asked if everyone understood. Everyone fell into stunned silence, each thinking their head was about to explode. The leading man removed his face cloth and slowly said Xiao Long's explanation was very clear and the mathematics excellent. Emphasizing each word, he promised he would succeed. Xiao Long happily replied that he was counting on them. That night, beneath the full moon, a voice rang out inside a brightly lit room. They had not expected D-dam to have such an effect. After hearing his granddaughter describe catching D-dam in the medicine room discussion, Her grandfather said he should also re-examine the poisons the Tang sect possessed. Hoa Nan obediently agreed. He lightly covered his mouth and coughed, then asked whether that boy was still good at mathematics. Hoa Nan answered yes, saying he divided one fin into 10 parts, and said it equaled the weight of 10 drops of water. Hearing this, the old man's expression turned serious. He gently rubbed his thumb and index finger together and spoke in a low voice. Recalling Xiao Long's immature appearance, his brows drew together. He said he had thought he knew a great deal about poisons, but Xiao Long surprised him even more. The more he learned, the more he felt the boy was a precious asset to the Tang family. Suddenly, he turned to his granddaughter and asked whether she liked Xiao Long more than she had at first. Hoa Nan stammered, calling him grandfather. Her face flushed slightly, and she did not dare look straight at him. She clenched her fist near her mouth to hide her shyness and softly said she felt guilty for having been too impatient at first. Understanding her feelings, he closed his eyes and told her to treat Xiao Long well from now on. Then he asked how they would test the medicine's effect. Hearing this, she suddenly froze, eyes widening. Remembering what had happened earlier, she covered her red face with her hand, feeling as if both her face and hands were giving off heat. Embarrassed, she said the elders were too arrogant. Thinking of Xiao Long's wicked expression when he said the family would punish them, she blushed even more. She told her grandfather the story. He asked in surprise, then burst into laughter a moment later, saying Xiao Long was truly an interesting person. Hoa Nan stood beside him in silence, her face still bright red. At that moment, everyone gathered in a large room, all focusing on the warrior standing before them. The elders were assembled, some resting their cheeks in their hands, others crossing their arms as they waited. The warrior placed a hexagonal wooden box before Xiao Long and said his medicine was ready. Xiao Long looked at the box and asked what it was. The warrior cupped his hands and explained that they had mixed licorice powder and honey to make it sweet and easier to swallow. Xiao Long inwardly thought they were very considerate. When he opened the box and saw the glossy black pill on red velvet, he asked whether they had prepared it exactly as he requested. The man answered carefully that of course they had followed the dosage he specified. Hearing this, the elders outside murmured, one coldly snorting that they were making too big a fuss, while another agreed that they were acting as if they had created something special. The man seated in the main position closed his eyes, and his dignified voice ordered silence. He looked at Xiao Long and asked how he would prove the medicine's effect now that it had been prepared. Xiao Long wondered about proving it. A powerful hand slammed the table with a loud bang, and a voice shouted that of course he had to prove it. The fat-bellied elder was the one who had struck the table. He stood and shouted that they could not send an untested poison to the Sichuan city lord. Another elder agreed that any mistake would be dangerous. Xiao Long looked toward the warrior and said there was no other way. The warrior nodded and reached into his robe. The elders watched closely. The warrior walked to the elders and placed the hexagonal medicine box just like Xiao Long's before the fat elder. The elder snorted, picked up the pill, and looked at it contemptuously, asking if Xiao Long wanted them to test the medicine. Who knew what was inside? Another quietly warned that this boy was not only an outsider but might have dark intentions. Knowing this, Xiao Long only smiled meaningfully. Nan Hoa's grandfather was enjoying the show when Xiao Long's call pulled him back to reality. He turned in surprise and asked what it was. Xiao Long asked whether he had not said that those who cultivated Tang sect martial arts were not afraid of any poison. Was that true? The old man nodded and said yes. Xiao Long happily clapped with a childlike expression and continued teasing him. Then why did he look worried? Grandfather touched his head as if agreeing that he did seem a little worried. Seeing everything develop as planned and watching everyone's faces grow heavy, Xiao Long cleared his throat and said they were all family elders who had reached 100 poison immunity. Surely they were not afraid of a lowly D-damn poison. Indeed, an elder crushed a pill, a confident smile on his lips. Xiao Long's group could barely suppress their amusement as the elders swallowed the pills one by one, even mocking that no one would fear such low-grade poison. Another quickly agreed, saying Xiao Long had underestimated them. After one elder swallowed the pill, he loudly threatened that if the medicine had no effect, Xiao Long would pay, and they would restore discipline in the clan. With that, he closed his mouth, chewed the pill, and swallowed. The atmosphere became silent. Everyone waited for the medicine to take effect. Time passed with nothing unusual happening. Unable to hold back, one elder sneered and pointed at Xiao Long, loudly saying nothing had happened. Before he could finish, he froze as if struck by lightning when he saw his disciple suddenly raise his head. All the elders lowered their heads, and the atmosphere became both silent and strange. That day, family discipline was firmly re-established. Under the dazzling sunlight, a voice rang out, ordering the medicine to be sent to the Sichuan city lord because it was highly effective. A while later, the elders left with strange expressions. Each one was flustered, clutching the front of his robe over his stomach, faces red as they departed. Xiao Long said that, just as grandfather had said, if they were provoked about poison, they would fall for it immediately. The old man laughed, saying those elders still had some pride left, so they had no other choice. Then he gently reminded Xiao Long not to hate them, because they acted that way for the clan. Xiao Long wondered if that was really true. The old man closed his eyes kindly and said they were family after all. Xiao Long obediently said he understood. Just then, Hoanan rushed in anxiously, calling out that something serious had happened. Seeing her, Xiao Long asked what was wrong. She bent over, panting, then slowly stood, adjusted her breath, and said there was a problem with their pets. Xiao Long exclaimed in shock. Suddenly, the old man grabbed him by the collar and called him grandson-in-law in a low, forceful voice. His face was furious, his eyes burning as he asked what she meant by their pets. Holding Xiao Long by the collar, veins bulging, he angrily asked whether the two of them had children already, and said it seemed he had not taught them properly. Hoanan stood frozen beside them, both angry and embarrassed, saying it was not a child but the centipedes, the ones Xiao Long was raising. Only then did Xiao Long freeze, his face filling with worry. He opened his mouth but could not speak for a long time. Grandfather released his collar. Xiao Long stepped in front of Hoanan and anxiously asked if she meant the centipedes. She hurriedly explained that since he had been training more lately, she had asked her sister to care for them. Hearing this, Xiao Long wondered if something had happened to his babies. In his panic, his wandering hand touched her chest as he said he needed to check. Beside grandfather's ear, his granddaughter's annoyed voice rang out, telling Xiao Long they were not there. A moment later, the two saw the centipedes lying obediently on the ground. Ignoring the red handprint on his face, Xiao Long whispered, asking whether she had said they suddenly stopped moving. Hoanan clenched her hands and said they had been fine since morning, and she hoped they were not hurting anywhere. Looking at the adorable centipedes lying on the ground, Xiao Long noted that their color had turned almost translucent, and their shells looked strange. Suddenly his eyes lit up, and he smiled at Hoanan, saying she probably did not need to worry. Watching the centipedes move slowly, he explained that they were only molting. Like snakes, when their bodies grow, they need to shed their old skin, and this was probably that moment. Hoanan's grandfather asked in surprise if they were molting, and Xiao Long leaned against the pool and nodded. Suddenly, one centipede rubbed its head against the ground, making a rustling sound. Hoanan hurriedly called for Xiao Long to look. Seeing the centipede's new orange-yellow body gradually emerge from the old shell, she cried out about its head. When the centipede completely escaped its old shell, the old man's voice filled with interest. Hoanan also watched closely, then suddenly said the other two were about to molt too. Another centipede slowly crawled out of its shell, its soft orange-yellow new armor looking almost tempting to touch. The last one also gently shed its old coat, its entire body slowly moving free. Seeing all three lying obediently on the ground, Xiao Long happily said they had all molted. Hoanan's eyes shone as she looked at them, and said they seemed larger than before. She turned to Xiao Long and asked what their names were. He paused. Names? He realized they did not have any, and his face grew serious. Resting a hand on his chin, he thought for a moment, looked at the three centipedes on the ground, and proudly declared, Centipede 1, Centipede 2, and Centipede 3. Hoanan immediately shook her head at those ridiculous names and said no. Thinking of the day when the little centipedes might fly through the sky and cross high mountains, she explained that a centipede that lived 1,000 years could become a dragon, so they needed more dignified names suited to a dragon's form. Xiao Long could not help laughing, asking how centipedes could become dragons after 1,000 years. Hearing their debate, grandfather chimed in that 1,000-year centipede was still called a dragon, so he would call them heavenly dragons. From his tone, Xiao Long immediately understood where Hoanan's attitude came from and realized her grandfather had taught her that. Xiao Long lowered his head to look at the three centipedes and thought carefully. Names, then? After deciding, he turned to Hoanan and said they should be called So Hung, Hung Nu, and Ban. She repeated the names in surprise. He explained that the first one had a faint fragrance, so he named it So Hung. The second had a more feminine shape, so he named it Hung Nu, from fragrance. The third had a glossy shell, so he called it Ban. Hoanan stared closely at all three and slowly repeated the names he had given them, So Hung, Hung Nu, and Ban. All three excitedly watched the centipede group. She softly said that normally a child's name was given by the father, right? And so the 3 baby centipedes received new names. Xiao Long staggered down the road, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. As he walked, he thought another day had passed, and the centipedes were still clinging tightly to him. It was exhausting. He sat beside a roadside crate, sighed, felt that his inner clothes were still damp, and thought his body might not be fully dry yet, though he could move. He sighed again, still feeling a bit uncomfortable. Suddenly, the centipedes crawled out from his clothes. One touched its head to his cheek and happily chirped. Xiao Long smiled faintly and thought they had grown much heavier, and their greatest change was size. He lay across the crate and looked up at the sky, his cheek reddened from friction. The centipede beside him softly chirped as if apologizing for being so heavy. Another centipede chimed in. Xiao Long sighed and remembered that at first they had only been as small as sausages, but now they were as big as his arm. He felt happy watching them grow and feeling each movement beside him. He thought the centipedes probably found his waist too cramped now, and could only cling to his arms and waist. Suddenly, loud laughter rang by his ear. He sat upright and looked toward the sound. 2 men, one tall and one short, were walking down the road. The short man had a mole on his face and held a small red pouch. He smiled at the other man, saying it really was the Sichuan Tang family, and they needed to observe the person on the right carefully, then told him to go. Xiao Long stroked the head of a centipede clinging to him, and heard that loud laugh again, saying money was so easy to earn. He watched them, and wondered what was going on. Looking up at the sky, he noticed that today truly was beautiful. White clouds drifted gently. At the Sichuan Tang estate, everything looked as usual, the atmosphere extremely quiet. The clan head cleared his throat and said Xiao Long had truly brought good news. He looked at Xiao Long and asked whether they had recently sent their homemade medicine to the Sichuan city lord. Xiao Long nodded. Thinking of the man's plump, tearfully grateful appearance, the clan head gave a thumbs up and announced that the medicine had worked very well, so the city lord had sent a large reward and his thanks. The 2 were delighted. Xiao Long happily asked if that was true. Hoa Nan's father laughed loudly, saying Xiao Long had become his son-in-law only recently yet had already helped him profit. Xiao Long had done a lot for him. Xiao Long shyly laughed and scratched his head, saying it was nothing. Suddenly, the man grew serious. Stroking his beard, he looked straight at Xiao Long and said that because of this, he would give him a spirit medicine whether Xiao Long modestly refused or not. Xiao Long asked in surprise what spirit medicine he meant, recalling that the man had once said spirit medicines increased inner power. Hoa Nan cut in and asked her father what that spirit medicine was. He replied that it was nothing too grand, then looked at the 2 of them and said each word clearly, the honey of the golden-furred bee king. Xiao Long immediately thought of bees gathering honey, and wondered if this meant bee honey. He had heard that inner power was important for becoming an expert, so he decided to accept it. Happily, he thanked his father-in-law. Hoa Nan's face suddenly tightened, losing all joy. She called out to her father and asked, either happy nor sad, whether the reward he mentioned was only honey. Seeing his daughter's attitude, her father grew awkward and stammered that she should let him finish. She grabbed Xiao Long's hand and angrily said that Xiao Long's contribution could not be treated lightly. Although the golden-furred bee king was a mid-grade poisonous insect, its honey was the lowest-grade medicine among spirit medicines. They could not be stingy with Xiao Long's reward when he had earned merit. She frowned and demanded a proper reward for him, at least a spirit medicine that would increase inner power by 1 year. Her father lowered his head and argued in a quieter voice that even spirit medicine was not cheap to refine. Hearing this, she clenched both hands, her eyes bright as fire, and said it was still too cheap compared with Xiao Long's effort. Her father avoided her gaze and coughed, secretly thinking that a grown daughter truly was like spilled water. Xiao Long broke the tension and asked his father-in-law what the golden-furred bee king was. He turned back, cleared his throat, and imagined a huge golden hive on a tree branch. Bees flew busily in and out gathering honey. He explained that the golden-furred bee king was a mid-grade poisonous insect usually found in forests, like a large bee, about the size of a small dog. According to experience, eating its honey increased inner power by 2 months. But what caught Xiao Long's attention was the golden-furred bee king's size. His eyes shone with excitement as he asked if it was really as big as a puppy, saying it sounded fascinating. Seeing him so happy, Hoa Nan pinched his cheek to stop him, telling him to wait because she was still angry. Her father awkwardly spoke again, saying that was not what he meant. He had chosen it because he thought Xiao Long would want to go directly to find the golden-furred bee king. Hearing this, Xiao Long startled and wondered, directly? He hurriedly stood and excitedly asked his father-in-law whether he wanted him to go directly to find the golden-furred bee king. The man nodded. Xiao Long's breath quickened, his face reddening with excitement. He thought of going directly to collect honey, something he had done many times as a YouTuber. He rushed toward the door and shouted that they should go, because he was very skilled at collecting honey. His father-in-law laughed happily, saying he knew Xiao Long would like it. Hoa Nan sighed as she watched the two leave, still hearing their conversation echo. Xiao Long asked curiously what the golden-furred bee king looked like, and her father coldly replied that of course it looked like a bee. After leaving the Sichuan Tang estate, their journey to the honey-gathering site began. Along the way, Xiao Long thought that because this was valuable information provided by his father-in-law, there surely would be no competition. But when he arrived, he found two groups arguing noisily. A scarred man shouted that they had arrived first, so the golden-furred bee king honey was theirs. A black-clad man shot back just as fiercely that they had legally bought the information, so it belonged to them. Xiao Long's group could not help being surprised. A man on the scarred side questioned whether the other group had bought the information too, asking if it was from a frizzy-haired man with a big mole on his face. The black-clad man could not hide his surprise and asked how he knew, but said they would not give way anyway. Xiao Long's expression suddenly stiffened as he remembered the two men he had seen on the road and wondered if it was them. Xiao Long began to understand. Those men had sold the information to others. Hoa Nan's father listened to the argument and trembled with anger. He clenched his fist, pressed his lips together, and cursed those bastards under his breath. He shouted that they dared humiliate the Sichuan Tang family here, making everyone turn toward his voice. Shock appeared on their faces, and one man cried out in panic. Xiao Long felt depressed, thinking his honey-gathering plan was ruined. He remembered Hoa Nan's father's reminder before the trip began. Xiao Long, this is your first time going out, so be extremely careful and remember that you are a member of the Tang family. Xiao Long politely answered yes. The man looked toward the people lying neatly below and said to bring them along, because Xiao Long needed to learn how to use people. Xiao Long asked in surprise if he meant taking them with him. He looked toward Hoa Nan and hesitated, but before he could finish, the man laughed loudly. He said that Hoa Nan was Xiao Long's person, and Xiao Long was her partner. Hearing this, Xiao Long blushed and stammered over the word partner. Hoa Nan also smiled cheerfully and encouraged him, saying he would do well, and added that she would help him too, making him even more embarrassed. Xiao Long answered that he would do his best. Now, between the Sichuan Tang family members and the groups that had arrived first, the atmosphere was tense as they stared each other down. Xiao Long nervously wondered what to do now. He turned to Yu Jiang, captain of the Poison Blood squad beside him, and asked how they should handle it. Should they share with them? Yu Jiang stroked his chin and asked how they would share. He stiffly crossed his arms, clearly disapproving, and asked who they were to demand a share from the Sichuan Tang family. Hoa Nan agreed, saying that though she did not know who they were truly bold. She glanced at the opposing group, killing intent rising in her eyes, because they dared sell information the Sichuan Tang family had bought. Hearing the leader's name, one man recognized her and said in shock, "Poison Flower Yui." The man behind him cried out in fear that the direct line Poison Flower of the Tang Sect had come. The leader immediately cupped his hands, teeth clenched as he calculated, then bowed and said that their Fengyan sect had not known this matter involved the Sichuan Tang family, so they would withdraw. Seeing him do this, the surrounding people were also surprised and seemed to understand the reason. They bowed one after another, saying their Yunhu sect would also withdraw. Another man cursed angrily that he would not let this go. After they retreated, Xiao Long stared at them leaving as if they had seen ghosts, and asked if they were really running away that quickly. He could not help wondering if the Sichuan Tang family was that terrifying. Seeing them disappear, he asked if it was over. Yu Jiang calmly answered that perhaps it was not. He predicted they were surely hiding somewhere nearby. Those people would not withdraw so easily. Then he turned and ordered a subordinate, Kao Bai, to locate them. Kao Bai cupped his hands respectfully and answered yes, master. Seeing Xiao Long's restless face, Hoa Nan comforted him and said it would be fine. Xiao Long looked toward the forest and mountains ahead and murmured about his bees. At that moment, Hoa Nan, Xiao Long, and Yu Jiang hid behind a boulder. Before them stood a huge tree with large holes at its base, where several giant bees hovered. Looking closely, the black and yellow bees were covered in thick fur. The swarm flew in and out of the tree trunk, their wing beats echoing. Xiao Long exclaimed that those were the golden-furred bee kings. Hoa Nan marveled that it was her first time seeing them and that they truly were big. Xiao Long happily said they were cute. Hoa Nan nodded and praised their fluffy fur. Yu Jiang proudly added that this was why they were called golden-furred bee kings. After observing for a while, Xiao Long guessed that even so, the colony seemed small, only a few hundred bees. Could bees really be that large? Hearing the unfamiliar term colony, Hoa Nan asked in surprise. Xiao Long patiently explained that it meant the whole swarm. A normal bee nest usually had 5,000 to 7,000 bees. She asked in surprise if he could know that without going inside. Xiao Long confidently said he could estimate by watching how many bees entered and left the nest. At that moment, footsteps sounded behind them, and they turned. Kaobai knelt on one knee and reported to the master that he had located the 4 sections. Yu Jiang asked where they were. Kaobai hesitated and explained. He described the tracking process. As predicted, they were currently lighting fires and waiting. Unable to restrain himself, he cursed quietly that those bastards were indeed on the opposite side. Although he could not see exactly what they were doing, they would certainly make a move. After hearing the report, Yu Jiang placed a hand on his chin and pondered. He thought they were probably waiting for nightfall to use the Tang family's method of gathering honey. Xiao Long curiously asked what that method was. Seeing his interest, Yu Jiang explained that if they burned mugwort leaves and let the smoke enter the nest, the bees would become calmer. Then they could go in and take the honey. Xiao Long nodded and praised it as a clever method. Kaobai beside them hesitantly spoke up, saying the wind was currently blowing toward them. Everyone looked up and saw the wind was exactly as he said, and they cried out together. While everyone was still worried, Xiao Long suddenly clenched one fist and struck it into his other palm, happily shouting that he had it. Kaobai quickly asked if he had thought of a method. Xiao Long flushed with excitement, and shared his idea. If the wind was blowing toward them, that meant they could hide their scent. Hoa Nan thought for a moment, and said that was true. Xiao Long immediately sprang to his feet, looked toward the tree, and shouted that he would go for a bit, and come right back. Hoa Nan panicked and called his name. Seeing him run, she hurriedly grabbed his robe to stop him, and said he could not go. The golden-furred bee king was a poisonous insect-class creature, and very dangerous. Instead of being afraid, Xiao Long became even more determined. Just once, he said, he would try touching it and come right back. Suddenly, a huge rock rolled toward them, making both of them cry out in shock. The rock continued rolling toward the golden-furred bee king nest and stopped. The two stared at the scene in horror. Xiao Long trembled and whispered in confusion. From inside the tree base, the bees quickly rushed out, full of killing intent. Hoa Nan hurriedly hugged Xiao Long tightly and ran the other way, saying they should run first. Xiao Long was squeezed around the neck and groaned painfully. The once quiet forest instantly fell into chaos, tense air spreading everywhere. Above, mist drifted lazily, and the sky gradually darkened toward evening. Xiao Long sat cross-legged on a rock and sadly wondered if there was no solution. He closed his eyes, trying to calm down and organize his thoughts. They needed to go against the wind to light the fire, but he was trapped between the 4 sects and the bee swarm. Thinking of the bee's cloud-like fluffy fur, he pressed his lips together and thought the golden-furred bee king might be different from the bees he knew. Opening his eyes, he rubbed his chin and remembered Hoa Nan carrying him away earlier, which sent a chill through him. Even from 30 meters away, he could feel the sound of the bee wings, but wasps were not usually like that. Suddenly, someone behind him called him over. He turned and saw Hoa Nan, happily calling her miss. She had brought several centipedes. 2 lay on her shoulders, while she held another in both hands and presented it to him, saying they seemed to have finished eating and kept flying around, so she brought them here. Seeing the centipede chirp non-stop, Xiao Long said emotionally, "Thank you very much, Miss Hoa Nan." The centipedes flew onto him, and Xiao Long gently said they had become calmer. Hoa Nan sat beside him. Even without speaking, the atmosphere was warm. After a long while, she turned to him and broke the silence, asking whether he had gathered anything else. He hesitated and said he only wanted to observe more. She immediately apologized for constantly urging him and told Xiao Long to think calmly without rushing. Hearing this, he felt more pressure and only smiled silently, thinking she was definitely urging him. Suddenly, Hoa Nan looked ahead and called out for him to look at the base of the tree. Far away, 2 monkeys were fighting under the tree while the bees flew around nearby, chaotic sounds rising. She asked if those were monkeys and whether they were fighting. Xiao Long was inwardly surprised. One monkey raised its arms and legs to threaten the other, constantly making intimidating noises. The other did not back down and responded fiercely. Watching this, Hoa Nan covered her mouth and exclaimed that they must be furious. Xiao Long only watched silently. Suddenly, a scent brushed past his nose. He called Miss Hoa Nan, looked around, and said there seemed to be some smell. He sensed that the scent came from the golden-furred bee king's nest and cautiously guessed what it might be. His face immediately darkened at the thought. Could it be pheromones? He quickly pointed toward the tree and shouted that they had to move away because the bees would soon get angry and come here. Although Hoa Nan did not understand what was happening, she nodded. She quickly stood, hugged him, and ran as before, leaving Xiao Long slightly stunned by her quick reaction. Just as the two leapt up to escape, a loud explosion sounded on the ground below, sending earth and stones flying everywhere. Hoa Nan landed while holding him tightly, and the two slid across the ground. Her body jolted to a stop, and she stared at the scene before them in stunned shock. The bee swarm rushed out like a storm. One of the two monkeys had been smashed to pieces, while the other groaned weakly. Large exposed wounds appeared on the monkey's arm, and the bees joyfully swarmed in to feed. Seeing the monkeys become a feast for the bees, Hoa Nan could not help saying in fear that they had nearly been in serious danger. Xiao Long nodded in agreement. She turned to him and asked curiously how he knew the golden-furred bee kings would rush out to attack, since he had told her to move before they heard the bees. Remembering the scent from the tree, he stammered that it was because of the smell. She asked what smell, then thought for a moment, and said it seemed like the scent of night-blooming fragrance. Xiao Long was shocked to hear that name. Seeing her calm expression, he wondered whether Manhua had the ability to distinguish pheromone scents. To confirm, he asked if she knew the scent from earlier. Hoa Nan smiled and said she did. The scent had been like night-blooming fragrance. Before she could finish, Xiao Long rushed over, grabbed both her shoulders, and joyfully said that was it. Hoa Nan blushed and murmured that Xiao Long was too excited. He buried his face in her shoulder and cried. Feeling how close they were, her face turned bright red even though she did not know why he was crying. The centipedes hidden in his chest poked their heads out. Xiao Long lifted his head from her embrace and smiled, saying he had found the way, the method to sweep away the four sects and obtain the honey.